This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope you had an awesome weekend. Welcome to another edition and another week of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Paterson back in the big chair. Big shout out to my guy, Michael Remis, who did a great job holding it down on Thursday and Friday when I was out at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge. What an incredible weekend we had out at Aikens. We'll touch on that in a minute, but very much looking forward to it, diving right back into it and getting into the latest today on the Winnipeg Jets. Mason Appleton with a 3-year extension, avoiding arbitration, as well as some of the other news and notes from around the National Hockey League, and of course, the latest on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who are back at practice today, looking to get to a perfect 10-0 Thursday night against the Montreal Alouettes before finally getting their first bye week of the season. We're going to kind of recap the entire weekend in the Canadian Football League and look ahead to Thursday with John Hodge of 3 Down Nation. And then a little later on in the program, Jeff Hamilton will come on with us. We'll get his thoughts on the Appleton extension, a little more on the Winnipeg Jets, and of course his thoughts on the class of the Canadian Football League, the 9-0 Winnipeg Blue Bombers. We'll also talk a little bit golf later on. We'll have some practice updates and then get to a bunch of news coming out of the National Hockey League today with a couple interesting signings, including in Boston. First things first, though, big thanks to all the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day, including our friends out at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, Wallace & Wallace, F Apparel, Vita Health, Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, Canadian Club, Assiniboia Downs, Boston Pizza, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Royal Sports, Culligan Water, Little Brown Jug, Not AutoCorp, and of course our friends over at Breezy Bend Country Club. All right, let's get this party started. Welcome to everyone joining us on YouTube. Hit that red subscribe button if you haven't already. And, of course, do the same wherever you get your favorite podcast. Make sure the WST is on your subscription list. Michael Remis, what's up? How did it go, my friend?
Yeah, other than me telling Hacksaw the wrong time to come on, I told him 2:30 Pacific. No, 2:30 Central. I forget what I told him. I think I told him 2:30 Pacific instead of 12:30 Pacific. He didn't come on, but which I feel terrible about. But other than that, I think it was fine for my first time hosting the show alone, so I felt more comfortable. Day 2, day 1, definitely some nerves involved, but it was good. And oh yeah, you missed this, Huss. The official sound of WST. Here it is. You missed this, Huss. The whole show on Friday. So it was a good time.
That's STW, Sport Talk du Winnipeg, because of course that was from Montreal, and that was ridiculous. It was sort of funny being able to, and we did catch the game. I may as well just give a quick first off, a little recap and thumbs up and thank you to the great folks over at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge. First and foremost, Pitt and Julie Turenne, the greatest hosts we could possibly have. Our guides, Liam and Paul, who were just great dudes, helped us out big time and did so much work making our trip such a phenomenal 5-star few days. And a special shout out to Enzo, the chef at Aikens Lake. I mean, one of the things that sort of separates Aikens, I think, from a lot of other spots is the hospitality as well as the food. And whether it was preparing some incredible kits for us to do fish tacos for our shore lunch, or the steak, the ribs, the chicken. I mean, it was decadent. And as I say, I'll probably have to wait for 361 odd days before I eat that well again. But Enzo, Pitt, Julie, Paul, Liam, thanks to everyone out there. And Remo, I'm just hoping that with your growing family, you'll be maybe able to join me next week, because it really is my favorite weekend of the year. And Man, we had such a great time. I know people are wondering, what about the fishing? Fishing was awesome. I didn't come back with a master. We did get one in our group. Shout out to Dom Pickering with a little bit of great guiding from Liam, pulling in a master angler. And we caught just a bunch, though. I mean, 23, 24, 25 inches. I think we had a Century Club, which is 4 fish totaling 100 inches in a day in the boat. But overall, just the chance to get away, get off the grid a little bit. Although, as I mentioned to you, Reem, we were able to I had never really dealt with the Starlink internet before. They got that hooked up in the last year since we were there, and it was phenomenal. We had no issue watching the entire Bomber game. Had a chance to watch the game between the Elks and Lions on Saturday night. So overall, just about a perfect weekend. So a big WST thank you to all the great people and staff at Aikens Lake, and we'll look forward to hopefully doing it again soon, and maybe drag you out of the city for a couple days, Reem, if you can make it happen.
Yeah, you've been talking to me about Aikens for years, and I've never made it out, and just hasn't worked out the last couple years. But yes, maybe we start planning early. It's certainly possible. Anything's possible.
Yeah, you would have a heck of a lot of fun. But now the fishing is completed and it is back to work. And hey, back to work for the Bombers. And we'll talk more about this with Jeff Hamilton. But before we get into the Jets signings, I have a feeling that'll probably take us up to John Hodge. We should mention, Remo, some great news for the Blue and Gold coming out of the weekend is that Greg Ellingson is back on the practice field. And, you saw the effect that Jackson Jeffcoat had coming back into the lineup after he missed playing time. And, everyone else has stepped up in the absence of Greg Ellingson, but considering how effective he was at the beginning of the season as the clear go-to guy for Zach Collaros and the most targeted receiver in the Canadian Football League, it's been great to see some other guys get the opportunity, but this team will certainly be better when number 2 is back in the lineup.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It team's definitely better with Greg Ellingson back in the lineup, but everyone seemed to step up so well. I mean, we had votes for Drew Wolodarski as player of the game last game here. Jerian Grant in the return game and receiving game. They had this will be a nice exercise because I didn't get a chance. I obviously wasn't on the show on Friday.
Yeah. I do have my top 3 Bombers in the game. My personal list.
We did.
So I'm
votes.
interested to see how this compares to your group. Very tough between number 2 and number 3, but I'm going to give the 3rd star of the game to Brady Oliveira.
Yeah.
I thought Oliveira was awesome, built off the great game he had the week before, and he really seems to be fitting his stride, and there's not a lot of angst about the Bomber running game right now with the way that Oliveira's playing. The number 2 star of the game is Janarian Grant.
Yep.
I thought Janarian Grant was impactful in an offensive role, had a number of touches, and I thought Buck Pierce did a great job of finding some creative ways to get him the football, and it paid off. And then, of course, the touchdown in the 4th quarter to really sort of win that game. I mean, to me, Janarian Grant was a real difference maker in that game, and he gets number 2. But, man, the guy that stood out to me, Reem, from the beginning of the game right until the end was a guy that had a bit of a shaky start to the season. But for my money, Winston Rose was the best player on the football field on Thursday night and was a massive part of eliminating what the Alouettes were going to do. Obviously, had the pick later on, and he had a huge game, and the Bombers needed it, kept them in, and then it turned into the proverbial squash match in the 4th quarter. How did I do with the top 3 compared to everyone on Friday?
Squash match. I think you could put them in any order. We had Drew Wolodarski. A lot of love for him. He had that 40-yard grab late, finished 5 catches, 90 yards. So I know the Bombers had Winston Rose on their infographic post-game saying he was their player of the game. I think for us,
he was nice.
He was theirs. I think I agree with all those, Oliveira and Janarian Grant. I think when we put out the votes to 4 of them, Oliveira, Rose, Grant, and Wolodarski, I think they were pretty much like split. It was very close all the way around with those on Friday. So everyone contributed. It was awesome to see. And I agree with you. Brady Oliveira seems to be becoming more comfortable. And Ed and I talked about that on Thursday and then followed it up Friday after he had the big game and really helped ice it there at the end.
No doubt about it. The thing with Oliveira, I mean, you knew he was working his ass off, and he was taking what he was able to grind out in the first few games. But I imagine it's somewhat him seeing the field a little bit better. I think it's an improvement in the consistency of the offensive line. But we're now seeing some big chunk plays out of the backfield. And, in the first few games of the season, when we were talking more and more about, the Bomber running game could really use to get going. There was a lot of 2 and 3 yards and then sort of second and longs. But to be honest, Remo, I think, and this is the best sign for Bomber fans going forward. Listen, the team is 9-0. I mean, there's not a lot to nitpick about what this team's done so far. But the running game at times was, a bit of concern. And again, they set the bar so damn high the last few years with Andrew Harris. There were going to be expectations, especially behind that offensive line. But I think of the two most important and most difficult games of the year for the Bombers, the road game in BC and the road game in Calgary, the first quarter of the BC game, the Bombers established the run, and that opened up everything for Zach Collaros in the final 3 quarters, and he took advantage of it. It was very similar against Calgary. I mean, the way the Bombers were able to run the football, I think, was incredibly impactful in the way they were able to play going forward. And now with the running game coming together, the team getting healthy, the defense rounding into form, I don't know who's going to beat these guys, but I don't think it's happening on Thursday. And wouldn't that be wild to see the team get to the bye week at 10-0 on the season?
Perfect season. Don't tell Mike O'Shea that it's possible. He's only knows that there's a game tomorrow. He's not aware.
He's not even aware of the other 8 games of the schedule after this one. He might. I think he will be aware that there's a bye week after this week because his hometown, I believe, of North Bay is honoring him. They're naming a field after Mike O'Shea. But first things first, he may not even know that that's on his itinerary because I'm sure the only thing he's thinking about is Thursday night against Montreal and tomorrow's practice and walkthrough before Wednesday's walkthrough, I guess, before the game.
Yes, and Danny Machocha said that Trevor Harris will start against Winnipeg. He took a maintenance day yesterday, and so did Gino Lewis, who was pretty good. So we'll have to wait and see about the final, lineup sheets when the Bombers tweet over. We see Ellingson back. I think Ed wasn't concerned last week. He didn't think it was anything major, but the Bombers, they're looking good. And I think we were maybe nitpicking a couple things, maybe a couple turnovers you didn't like, but they're able to overcome it just like they did against Edmonton and come out with a win. And it was an awesome game, and they really pulled away in the fourth quarter. It was tied heading into it. So we'll have to wait. We'll see the rematch Thursday. Bring the air horns. Or no, don't bring them.
Don't bring the air horns.
Like we can,
I'm pretty sure air horns are banned at IG Field.
They are.
Probably any other stadium in North America, I would imagine that they are banned, and yet somehow people are really good. It must have been huge for DT and the CGOB broadcast, because I have a feeling there was many people that paused their TVs, synced it up, and listened to DT and Doug Brown call the game. And but even there, maybe they had to deal with the air horns as well up in the booth.
I was under the impression that using those outside of like an emergency boat setting was illegal, but maybe my knowledge of the law is limited. But I thought it was like common courtesy not to do that in someone's face. Like I couldn't imagine having to sit next to those people. Oh, I'd like to think they were wearing ear protection while using those, but I doubt it.
Can you imagine being a fan sitting by those guys?
It'd be the worst.
Oh, and I would have been. I can't believe they were allowed to continue doing it all game. I mean, that was just. Anyways, we won't spend too much time on that, but don't be air horn guy coming up. You can bring your cowbell, bring your voice, bring your friends to the game on Thursday, but no air horn. Thank you very much on that. We'll talk more CFL coming up. I'm looking forward to getting together with John Hodge and get his thoughts on all of the games and a bit of a look ahead to the upcoming week in the Canadian Football League. And certainly we'll get to some of that with Jeff Hamilton. But we'll also talk about what the Jets have done over the course of the weekend. Remo, that was the news that Mason Appleton is back on a 3-year extension. I got to give the Evolving Hockey guys credit. And we picked up an Evolving Hockey subscription so we could, kind of through free agency to compare what numbers they have pegged at as, if you were thinking about getting guys on your roster, what the sort of cost would be. And they have consistently nailed these numbers, and they came pretty damn close on the Appleton deal. $2 million this season, 2.25 next, and 2.25 the year before, of a 2.167 AAV. And Appleton is back for 3 years in Winnipeg. Sort of a roundabout way to get to this point, Reem, when he was left unprotected in the expansion draft, claimed by Seattle. Never really found his stride in Seattle like he had in previous years with the Winnipeg Jets, especially alongside Adam Lowry. Came here to Winnipeg and now has 3 more years and a nice hefty raise for Mason Appleton. And, as we talked off air, this was pretty much the number that they had pegged for Appleton to be right around a $2 million player. And he's going to get a chance to come in and for the next 3 years, presumably, in all likelihood, on the right side with Adam Lowry, get a chance to make an impact in both ends of the rink. And certainly the Winnipeg Jets and Rick Bowness are going to need that from Appleton after committing to him.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I didn't realize that Evolving Hockey had him projected for like 2.21. He signed for a 2.16 AAV, 3-year, $6.5 million contract, buys out 1 year of unrestricted free agency. I thought, at first glance, I thought it was kind of high. He did have a down year last season. He had 21 points in 68 games. But the year before that, he was pretty good. He had 25 and 56. That's a 37-point pace. But I think, to me, it shows that the Jets believe in Mason Appleton and think he's, better than he showed last season. You had the transition going to Seattle. You're on a poor Seattle team. Maybe you're not familiar. He's brought up with the Moose. He's had success here. I think they want him to be a key part of this team especially now that Andrew Kopp is gone, and they believe in him. And for him, you get a 3-year deal, you get a nice raise, double your salary. I think this one could work out, and I'd like to see him get back to the level he was at 2 years ago rather than today. I don't know if we're going to see a marriage, off-season wedding bump from Mason Appleton. We did show his wedding picture that the Jets tweeted out on Friday's show. Looked great in that cream suit. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think him and Lowry's going to be now with Appleton before it was with Kopp.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest questions going into next year is who's going to be the other guy on that line. Now there could be some significant changes if the Jets ever make a Blake Wheeler trade, which I'm sort of feeling is less and less likely as we get closer to the season, but that's just a feeling right now. There is still a lot of time and there's a lot of teams that need to make moves, but I think what we're seeing, with the fact that Vegas had to basically give Max Pacioretty away, very productive player, 1 year left, $7 million. What happened to the Columbus Blue Jackets with Oliver Bjorkstrand, I think it's easier said than done. So if that is the case, if the Jets essentially have that same group and Blake Wheeler is in the top 6, and presumably Cole Perfetti would be in that spot. You've got Scheifele and Dubois, and you've got Connor and Ehlers. Who is in that left side spot with Adam Lowry? And listen, I was somewhat critical of Lowry through the first half of the season. There wasn't a lot of production from that third line. I think there is an argument to be made that, part of it was the fact that, Christian Vesalainen was an absolute anchor on that line. I don't know what you feel about that, Reem. And, coming out of the All-Star break, Adam Lowry was really good. Certainly the numbers came back. Not only was he effective at 5-on-5, but really effective at the penalty killing role. And, while Appleton didn't have big numbers back with the Winnipeg Jets, it seemed like he was feeling more and more comfortable throughout. But I do wonder, is it Morgan Barron that gets that opportunity to possibly play third line? Is it David Gustafsson, or is Gustafsson more likely the fourth line center? I'll say this, if you're a bubble player at forward right now for the Winnipeg Jets, at least the way things look on paper, barring more additions, you'll never have a better opportunity to not only get into the top 12, but potentially even into the top 9, because there is no clear-cut favorite for these positions outside, I think, of that tandem of Appleton and Lowry, which will presumably be the center and right wing on the third line when they drop the puck.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens with the lineup. I am curious if we're going to see something different than what we've seen in the past. Jansen Harkin's a guy seeing in the chat, getting some love. When he had to fill in on the top line, I think he had some good games. I think there was a lot of period of time where he didn't really contribute onto the score sheet. And maybe if he's given an opportunity for more minutes, he can make something happen. Morgan Barron as well, a guy who could step in. I agree with Vesalainen, and I'm actually kind of shocked he got so much time after really, what do you have, 4 points in 50 games? I think it was.
Yeah, he had one goal in 56 games.
And
he was basically just about in James Wright territory.
I thought he did have chances at times, but never finished. So he's going back to Europe, and so Gustafsson is the last remaining RFA. He'll probably get around $1 million contract, and you hope that he can stay healthy because we've been calling for this Gus bus for like a year and a half at this point.
Yeah, me too. I'm all in on David Gustafsson. I mean, there's no way he can have as bad luck this season as he did last season. I don't think that's possible.
No,
if he can make it through the first period of the first game, I think that will be a start. But he's shown at the AHL level he's ready to go. I think he brings a very unique package to a bottom six role that you hope might turn into a little bit of offense as well. But certainly when it comes to faceoffs, when it comes to defensive responsibility, when it comes to holding your own in your own end, Gustafsson, I think, will be a great guy to have that play. And as I said, right now, Christian Reichel is still the top right wing, like the fourth line right wing right now. So there definitely is going to be some competition. And I still do think I will hesitate to get too far down this road talking about this right now as it is, Reem, because I do think that there is going to be some additions to the roster. I guess the big question is, will there be subtractions to the roster as well? And how that shakes out for Rick Bowness when he opens up his first camp as a head coach of the Winnipeg Jets 2.0.
Yeah, my big topic in the host chair last week when you were gone was, is this it? Is this what we're going to see with the roster? And yeah. And I was like, there's
preying on the
way.
Impatience of the fan base. I hear you.
There's no way.
I get it.
And I agree with you. Ken also came on and said Friday, he's like, look, they might have like 5 million. They've been on Danton Heinen, Calle Yarncroke. And it's funny how you see Appleton get this 3-year deal, and then you see, guys who are able to contribute not get any deals at all. And I guess it's RFA versus UFA, discussions. But there are players we've talked about. Evan, we're on Rodriguez watch, Sonny Milano watch. I think there was one other. We're still trying to see where, is it possible that like Svechnikov gets brought back last second? I'm not sure about that, but there are players who are NHL caliber who can contribute and had good seasons.
The guy that's interests me is Paul Stastny. I mean, I know that he apparently is wanting to sign with a contender, but the fact of the matter is it's in August. He doesn't have a deal right now, and maybe there could be something essentially sort of set up with Colorado. Wouldn't blame him for jumping at that. Certainly would give him a better chance to win a cup next year. But I have to think that the way Stastny played last year and just how important he is to the team, to the dressing room, maybe they could circle back on a 1-year deal. I think that the need for Paul Stastny is as big here as it is anywhere else. That is for sure. And here's the other thing. And I was on with Dave McCarthy today on Sirius XM NHL Radio, talking about the Jets in the offseason. And the one thing that I think is very important to note, right now, let's take a look at Cap Friendly. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 teams that are over the cap right now. So there are going to need to be some moves made. It's the Lightning, the Capitals, the Edmonton Oilers, the Florida Panthers, the Vegas Golden Knights, Vancouver, Philly, Columbus, Toronto, Pittsburgh, and San Jose. Now, there could be some corresponding moves that will get a few of these teams below it, but the bottom line is they're pushing the limit right now, some going over. And I think that the value of the cap space has been very clear. Part of the reason why that's been probably difficult to make a move involving Captain Blake Wheeler. But on the other side of it, the cap space that Cheveldayoff does have, as opposed to going and just signing a free agent, might there be a better option through trade? Because not only would you be getting the player, but there's a good chance that you might be getting something from a team to take a contract off of it. So To me, that almost is where I'm more interested in looking at right now. The teams that are up against the cap, that have RFAs to sign, that have to make some sort of move before rosters have to be locked and cap compliant. And I think if that, and more than anything, that might be the opportunity for Kevin Cheveldayoff to go in and get the biggest bang for his buck when deciding how to use his cap space.
I couldn't agree more, and we talked a lot last week about Jesse Puljujarvi, who was signed by Edmonton. They're rumored to want to move on from him for a while. They're $6 million over the cap. They still have to sign Ryan McLeod, and we've seen these deals like Oliver Bjorkstrand being given away, Devon Taves last year given away. If you can find a guy for late picks or future considerations, what is that? Max Pacioretty as well. I mean, pretty good player. Trade away. So, I think there's going to be, guys that you can get if you can scoop in there with, your valuable cap space and grab someone. So, we got time. I mean, it's amazing to me. Nazem Kadri still hasn't signed. We're still waiting on that. So there are definitely, I don't think the Jets are in on him, but I'm saying that just speaking to the caliber of players available, and I don't think all the dominoes have fallen yet. We're still going to wait and see what happens as we approach training camp. People are asking, when does that start? Well, Young Stars tournament, we're like a month and a week away from that, which is crazy to think.
Yeah, don't worry about Nazem Kadri. He's already signed a 7-year deal with the New York Islanders. Lou Lamoriello is just not going to tell any of us about it until early in September when Kadri shows up on Long Island for the camp. I'm joking, of course. We don't know that that's a fact, but there has been plenty of reports out there that it is essentially done, and it would be just like Lou Lamoriello to make us all wait a little while to find out officially. All right, we are going to talk CFL with John Hodge of 3 Down Nation. Just before we do, a big thank you again to our friends at Aikens Lake. What an incredible time we had out at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge. If you're thinking about an amazing experience both on the water and at the lodge, there really is nothing like Aikens, and it is the people there, the amenities, the food that takes it to the next level. Find out more at aikenslake.com. They're already booking for next year, so might be a great time to get on that. Give Pitt Terren a buzz at aikenslake.com or on Twitter at aikenslake, and maybe we'll see you out there next year. Of course, the gang at Wallace & Wallace are busy this summer. They're Winnipeg's fencing and overhead door specialist and boathouse door specialist. You've seen their fences and trucks all over the city. They've been serving residential and commercial customers since 1946. And if you were out on the lake this weekend and caught a boathouse door caught your eye, pretty darn good chance that it is a Wallace & Wallace door. And they'll also do servicing on cottage locations as well. Find out more at 204-452-2700. One of the experts at Wallace can arrange a time to come and give you a free estimate for work in the city or at your cottage, including service work on your boathouse door. You can also visit them online at wallacefences.com or wallacedoors.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Road off of Kenaston. Listen, I don't want to freak everybody out, but we're just a few weeks away from Labor Day. We're getting back to school, back to work, back to regular business. And over the last couple of years, you probably haven't had to wear a suit very much. But if you are thinking about events and things that you need to look good for next year, the guys at F Apparel are ready for you and ready for fall with incredible custom-made suits beginning at just $400. An amazing shirt special right now. 3 shirts for $210 as part of their summer special. Pop down and see them at 190 Smith Street downtown. They've got more too. Custom golf pants, winter jackets, dress shirts, as you mentioned, casual chinos, untucked dress shirts, shoes, ties, and more. They've got it all for you. You can also book an appointment and find out more online at EPHapparel.com. And hey, another great week coming up and a great time to get the gang together around the barbecue. And Vita Health Fresh Market is not only stocked with Winnipeg's best selection of local, organic, and natural grocery supplements and beauty products, but amazing options for your barbecue like lean bison steaks or chicken, hot dogs, burgers, and some great non-alcoholic beverages as well, like Sober Carpenter beer and clever mocktails if you are entertaining. Vita Health's a great local company that's been in business since 1936, 85 years of empowering the people to lead healthy lives. They've got 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and check out their fully shoppable website online at myvita.ca. All right. Well, let's talk a little more about the 9-0 Bombers and the week that was in the Canadian Football League, and take a look ahead to Thursday night. We welcome in John Hodge from 3 Down Nation. John, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing great, Huss. How about you?
Awesome. Got a great chance to get away for a couple days, and shout out to the great Starlink internet hookup out at Aikens Lake. We were able to watch the game, and it was an interesting. I was describing it the next day in the boat with the guys that game, being a wrestling guy, it sort of reminded me of the champ going up against, a somewhat of a contender. And in typical wrestling style, there's some offense on one side, some offense on the other. And then the ref sort of let them know, hey, guys, we got to wrap this one up. And then in the fourth quarter, it became the squash match that a lot of people expected. I mean, hard to believe a game that was so close ended up being a 21-point difference. But that is just how good and effective this Bomber team can be, especially in crunch time. What did you think of the overall performance of Winnipeg getting to 9-0 before a rematch with the Alouettes on Thursday?
Yeah, it kind of felt like, like a lion playing with its food before eating it. You know what I mean? This game was tied 14-all relatively late. And Winnipeg made a lot of mistakes in this game. Zach Collaros threw 3 interceptions. The third one, I don't think was on him. Marc-Antoine Dequoy just made an amazing pick to steal that ball from Nick Dembski. But the first 2, I think, were largely on him. They turned the ball over 4 times, which is not something that we're used to seeing from them whatsoever. But that being said, the early mistakes aside, right? They gave up the big return as well to Tyson Philpott, the first-round pick out of the University of Calgary. This team, when push came to shove, absolutely dominated the fourth quarter, right? They get the big touchdown return from Janarian Grant. Trevor Harris was throwing everything underneath all day. All of a sudden, he has to throw it down the field late, and the Bombers come up with 2 picks. This team, it's not a surprise to anybody that this team won the game. This team has won 19 consecutive meaningful games dating back to last season. If you include the playoffs, I don't think anybody expected them to go into Montreal and play poorly. But let's also remember, they were on a short week. This team still is yet to have a bye this season. They're on their 3rd straight away game and their 4th game in 19 days. So I do think that, the mistakes aside, this was still a big win for this team, especially considering they showed just how dominant they are in that fourth quarter.
Well, one of the things I love so much about Mike O'Shea, other than putting together a team that wins every week and keeps Bomber fans very happy, is the fact that he is the most no excuses, no BS guy. He's never talking about the schedule. He's never talking about the travel. Honestly, that is just not part of his vocabulary. He won't say it, but I will. This team has had a ridiculous schedule. They have had every built-in excuse that could be used has been there. They haven't even touched it, and they are 9-0 right now, looking to get to 10. They've played half of their season in some of the most trying conditions, schedule-wise, everything that we've mentioned. Just how special has this first half of the season been for this Winnipeg Football Club, John, as they look to get to 10-0 before they experience their first bye week of the season?
Yeah, and look, the CFL schedule is always going to be a challenging one to put together because, of course, you've got an odd number of teams. You've got a gigantic, beautiful country of ours to contend with in terms of travel. But at that said, you have to find a way to make it equitable. The Bombers twice have had to play now, not only on just 4 days of rest, but travel the furthest distances possible, right? They had to fly all the way to Vancouver and play on a short week. This past week, they flew all the way to Montreal on a short week, right? It's one thing to stay at home on a short week. It's another thing to travel, say maybe from Winnipeg to Regina, or have another team. Let's say, Toronto go to Hamilton or Ottawa go to Montreal on a short week. But to have these massive long flights paired with a short week is certainly not easy. And I think that's what certainly made those 2 victories over BC and Montreal so special, especially the first one over BC. Winnipeg went there undefeated, but the Lions were undefeated at that time. That's still the Lions' only loss, right? They improved to 6-1 this past weekend with another dominant win over the Edmonton Elks, and the Bombers went in there and took care of business. They made the BC Lions look like the 2021 BC Lions, which is to say not very good. So the schedule has not been easy, but the plus side of that is that the schedule in the second half is much, much more favorable. The Bombers have already won the season series against the Calgary Stampeders. They're going to wrap up their season against the Calgary Stampeders after their upcoming bye, and they get 6 of their final 9 games at home, which obviously when it comes to Winnipeg weather late in the year, I think that's going to be an advantage. We all know that IG Field is always a big home field advantage with the amount of noise that fans are able to produce, but playing a home center, right? They only got 3 away games left, and the season's still going for another 4 months. That's ridiculous to me, especially considering that it looks, it's not done yet, obviously, but it's looking extremely likely that this team will be hosting the West Final come November.
Yeah, I'm getting a crack out of all the comments and the the comments in the chat about Paul Maurice. And yes, I have mentioned this before. It did drive me nuts when Maurice would talk about how tough the trip was going and all the travel and everything. It almost, to me, it sounded like a self-fulfilling prophecy where they were putting out excuses before they'd even left and played these games. And it's a stark contrast to what's going on with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers with their lose players, short week, whatever, no excuses. You go out and get it done. But back to your point, John, about the second half of this season. They can get this win and get to 10-0. Only 3 games on the road. There'll be 5 more games at home, 3 bye weeks. I mean, big picture, I think it puts them in the most enviable position in the league when it comes to preparing for the playoffs, to clinching that first spot. But is it insane to think that we might, in a month or a month and a half, be talking about the Bombers doing something that we've never seen before, and that would be running the table in the regular season?
I mean, it's possible we'll be talking about it. I don't think it's possible to do, right? I don't think it's possible to go 18-0 over the course of a CFL regular season. And we can look back just one season, right? 2021, the Bombers got off to a 10-1 start. And of course, they rested players down the stretch, lost 2 of their last 3 games. One of them was the game in Montreal where they started their backup, Sean McGuire, who has since moved on from professional football. The other game was a game they probably should have won at McMahon Stadium. Both teams rested a bunch of guys, and the Bombers led for the vast majority of that game. Calgary, I think they scored 10 points late, got the win. To me, it's impossible to go 18-0, but that shouldn't matter. I don't think. I mean, it's a storyline, and if this team does reach 13-0, 14-0, 15-0, people are going to be talking about it. And hey, the CFL needs all the attention, all the discussion, all the coverage that it can get. So those types of conversations, I think, would be great. Do I think it's realistic? No. The CFL is a marathon, not a sprint, right? The NFL, with its playoff structure, the way that the divisions are set up, it's a sprint. If you come out of the gate 2-5 in the NFL, your season is essentially over for all intents and purposes. In the CFL, that's not at all the case, especially if you play in the East. At 2-5, you might be hosting the East Final, right? So to me, I don't think 18-0 is possible, but I am excited to see what this team can do from a historical perspective. I believe the best start ever is still 12-0. The Calgary Stampeders did that 70 years ago when the CFL was still playing shorter seasons. So it is possible that Winnipeg could at least break the record for best undefeated start to a season. And that advantageous schedule we've been talking about would certainly help them do that.
Well, and just to look ahead a little bit, I mean, you've got this game on Thursday, and if they were to win that game, you get to 10-0. You got the week off. You come back to host a very good Calgary team in the third matchup of the season, having already won the season series. To get to 12-0, that would be the Labor Day Classic in Regina, and then the opportunity to break the record would be at home in the Banjo Bowl. And it's interesting, you got the Ticats at home, another trip to Regina, a home game against the Elks, and then the final 2 weeks of the season with the bye week in the middle of them, John, is 2 weeks against the British Columbia Lions. And I think the most likely thing, I mean, first of all, if you just were betting against a team running the table, the fact of the matter is if they're in a situation where we're even talking about that, they're also in a situation where they've clinched first place, and it probably doesn't make a lot of sense because the ultimate goal is not to go 18-0 in the regular season. It's to host the West Final. It's to win that game and one more playoff game and become 3-time consecutive Grey Cup champs.
Of course, right? If this team is truly that good, at 13-0, 14-0, 15-0, they'll have had the West Division long since clinched. Calgary has 2 losses. Winnipeg already has the tiebreaker against them. BC, I mean, if I'm the Blue Bombers, and of course they never talk about the schedule publicly, as you mentioned, but I'm giddy that I don't have to play BC until week 19 and 21. Because if you played that team, let's say a month from now, and BC was able to keep pace with you, all of a sudden you're in a position where the 0-loss Winnipeg Blue Bombers and 1-loss BC Lions, you could see a leapfrog in the standings if BC were to sweep those games. Yes, Winnipeg went into Vancouver and won, but BC could still theoretically win the season series against this Winnipeg football team. So having BC at the very end of the season, I think gives you the best chance to continue to put space between you and the Lions. And by the way, this week is a massive game between the BC Lions and the Calgary Stampeders. And that's something that I think Winnipeg is going to count on, as those two teams beating each other up for the right to host the West semifinal. I think those two teams are very clearly the next two best teams in the CFL behind Winnipeg. They're going to be doing some damage on one another to try to get that second spot. And in the meantime, Winnipeg could sit back and laugh and wait for the West final, because absolutely this team is going to rest players down the stretch, provided that they clinch. I think those two things are almost a foregone conclusion to this point. And the way that they handled that in 2021, I think, can give us some insight as to how Mike O'Shea might handle it in 2022. Zach Collaros started a game and played essentially the whole thing at IG Field against the Montreal Alouettes after this team had already clinched first place in the West Division. It wasn't until the following week that they sent a predominantly backup squad to Montreal to play the Alouettes. So there is some precedent for Mike O'Shea starting the actual starters, despite having number one in the West Division wrapped up. But there's also precedent for him, you know, after maybe a game of that, sitting some guys who he wanted to preserve for the postseason run.
By the way, shout out to Wenberg and a couple of the folks that I think pointed this out. I did screw up the home team in that final Rider Bomber game. The game on September 30th, the game that's not part of the Banjo Bowl Labor Day Classic, that third game is actually here in Winnipeg, one of the remaining home games for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The only road games the Bombers have left are the Labor Day Classic, a trip to Hamilton on the 17th, and then a trip to BC on the 15th of October. Hey, listen, before we talk about that Lions Stamps game, which will be, I mean, a great tilt this week and certainly the game of the week in the CFL, just going back to it. By the way, yeah, hit the red subscribe button, folks. If you're enjoying the conversation, join us daily, 1 o'clock here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. We're talking with John Hodge from 3 Down Nation on some Canadian Football League topics. You know, I was away. We watched the game on a laptop, but obviously got most of the broadcast in. Incredibly impressed with Brady Oliveira, the way he and the running game have come around. I was impressed with Buck Pierce and the ability to get some creative plays to get the ball into Janarian Grant's hands. But for my money, the most impactful player on the field in the last game against Montreal was Winston Rose. What a comeback. What a turnaround he's had from a pretty iffy start to the season, John. I mean, what do you think of my thought that Rose was the top guy on, and just maybe a comment on those 3 players and how impactful they were?
Yeah, let's start with Rose. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Winston Rose has struggled at times this season. He started the year at the boundary cornerback spot. He has since been moved to field side, which many would consider a demotion, though, of course, the moving of the hash marks into the middle of the field has seen more action go to the field side of the field this year. That being said, I mean, I found it interesting. Eugene Lewis is by far and away the number 1 target in Montreal this year. He typically plays on the boundary. They moved him to the field side a lot this last game to try to get him the football. The only 2 times that I can remember offhand where he was to the boundary was the time they looked to him in the end zone. He was well covered by Demario Houston. And the other time was when he just managed to get his right foot in bounds. It was ruled incomplete at the time, and then the officials reviewed it after a challenge, and Lewis was ruled in bounds. So Winston Rose saw a lot of Eugene Lewis, who, again, is the top target in Montreal, and one could argue the best receiver in the CFL. I mean, this guy has done it in, year out for the past 4 seasons, and I think just this year is finally starting to get the credit nationwide that he's probably deserved for a long time. And Rose held his own. He had the 6 tackles, which was sensational. He had the pick, the first of 2 picks. I believe it was Adam Bighill who had the second. And that really helped set the tone, especially that late turnover. It really kept the momentum in Winnipeg's favor, and it gave them a short field to operate on. The other guy I'll highlight that you mentioned there, Huss, Brady Oliveira. I mean, the Bombers did not run the football well whatsoever through the first 7 weeks of the season. We saw Johnny Augustine getting a larger role in the offense before he got a little bit banged up. I think that's the reason why we haven't really seen Johnny Augustine the last couple of weeks, a little bit banged up. But I've asked people around the league. I've talked to people who have played against Winnipeg and said, why can't this team run the ball? And basically their answer was, just you wait. This team can run the ball. There's nothing wrong with this team. Certainly there are teams stacking the box a little bit more than they had in past years. A lot of five-man fronts forcing the Bombers to put the ball in the air a little bit more. But they said, just you wait. And I remember feeling very skeptical after week 6, week 7, saying, I don't see this running game all of a sudden coming to life. Well, lo and behold, Brady Oliveira had the 100-yard game 2 weeks ago. This past week, he came just shy of 100 yards, got his first touchdown. And obviously, I mean, if there was one critique for this Winnipeg team through the first, month and a half of the season, was they don't have any balance on offense, right? They could pass the ball. Zach Collaros is looking like a potential MOP candidate, but they can't run the ball. All of a sudden, that phase of their offense has really taken off. Brady Oliveira looks like a completely new player. The offensive line has really done a great job with Chris Kolinkowski in the middle, taking over for an injured Michael Couture. And if I was an opponent playing against Winnipeg's offense in the near future, I'd be pretty upset that this running game has found its legs because, again, if there was one weakness to exploit, that was it. Guess what? It's come alive.
Well, and you know what? I mean, to be honest, from, putting the fan hat on, I mean, I was most optimistic about the running game because of what they did in BC. The first quarter in BC, and I keep going to that, they had more rushing yards than they did in the entire game against the Argos the previous Monday. And to me, I thought that was absolutely pivotal in opening up the opportunities for Zach Collaros to pick apart the Lions the way he did. And we saw very similar things in the Calgary game in the second meeting between the two teams, where it was the running game that really established itself and then I think opened up the rest of the passing game. And that hadn't happened in some other games. Is this Oliveira getting more confidence? Is this the offensive line consistently opening up more holes? I mean, any theories as to why it has improved the way that it has over the course of the last third, shall we say, of the first half of the season, John?
I mean, using the old eyeball test, I think Brady Oliveira has run a little bit more angry, a little bit more violent. He's spoken to the media about that and saying, I think, he essentially said, I think maybe I've been trying to hit the home run each play instead of just being the power north-south runner that I am and trying to get, 8 and 10-yard chunks. And I think that's largely what we've seen from Brady over the past few weeks, is not necessarily the 50-yard carries that you might see elsewhere around the league, but that's not what an offense needs all the time. What an offense needs is for an offensive back like Brady, who's 250 and 220 pounds, to hit the hole and get north for 7, for 8, for 9, to set up those second and short opportunities, right? They have other game breakers in this offense who can provide those 40 and 50-yard gains. They don't need that on a handoff on first and 10 every single time. And so I do think Brady has changed his game somewhat. I do think that the offensive line has needed some time to gel, right? Jeff Gray obviously is also in there for Drew Desjardins, who's off in the NFL. He's been in since week 1, but it still takes time for these guys to gel and build that chemistry as a line. And now that the zone looks seem to be getting more and more chemistry up front, people are seeing the pictures a little bit better. And Zach continues to throw the ball well. Defenses can't necessarily just fill the box and stuff the run and make Zach beat them with his arm, because guess what? He's doing it. And so I think that is the reason why. And again, I was skeptical about all of this, but the more people I talked to, the more they said no. And these are people who watch the film and get paid to game plan against CFL offenses. They're saying, no, the run game, it's not broken. It's going to work. And guess what? They were absolutely right.
No doubt. John Hodge is with us from 3 Down Nation. Now, John, we'll be a nice way to preview your picks piece at 3 Down later on this week, but we have to talk about this BC Calgary game. I'm just looking. Coolbet's opened it up as basically a pick 'em. Calgary is a half-point favorite at home, and the money line is -114 for Calgary, -106. Just when you think about this game right now, how do you handicap it? Is there a clear favorite on either side for you? And does Calgary make the most of the home cooking, or does BC maintain that single loss in the L column?
Well, I'll say this. This has been a very interesting season for both teams. Calgary, I think, has been guilty of playing down to its opposition at times this year. They started with a very narrow win over the Montreal Alouettes. Calgary was terrible, I thought, this past week against Ottawa. I mean, they still won by 14 points. I think that is more of just a factor of Ottawa being that much worse. But they did not play well at all. They were fantastic in the loss to Winnipeg. I thought they played their best game of the year. They did lose, but I thought they played their best game of the year. I thought last week might have been their worst game of the year. So Calgary, I think, has played up and down to its opposition. If that holds true, I think Calgary is going to have a great game this week. And BC has been kind of the opposite. I think they've been great at pouring it on. We've seen them decimate the Edmonton Elks twice. They smashed the Toronto Argonauts in week 2. I think it was 44-3. Yet when Winnipeg came to town, they kind of rolled over. And again, they looked like the 2021 version of the BC Lions. And so I'm interested to see which team shows up. Is Calgary going to continue to show up and give their best A game when it's required? Is BC going to be able to buck the trend and live up to one of these top West Division opponents? Again, BC's had a relatively easy schedule. They've only had one game against Winnipeg. They've not played Calgary this far. Personally, if I had to put money on it right now, I would put money on Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions to go in there and get the win. I think Bo Levi Mitchell is going to be motivated to upstage the young buck. Bo Levi Mitchell completed fewer than 50% of his passes against the Ottawa Red Blacks this past week. He did not have a sharp game whatsoever. So I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be decided by a field goal or less. But for right now, I'll take the BC Lions at McMahon Stadium.
Here's the million-dollar question that really matters here around Winnipeg. Which of these teams would be a greater threat to the Bombers playing in November at IG Field in a West Final?
I think it's Calgary. I really do. I think Calgary has better veteran leadership. They've been there. They've done that. The Lions are a bit of an upstart team. The Lions have not won a playoff game, I think, since the 2016 West semifinal when they beat Winnipeg. I'd have to get double checked on that, but it's been a long time since we saw them in the postseason. Nathan Rourke, if I had to vote for MOP today, would get my vote, but we haven't seen what he's done in the playoffs. Whereas Bo Levi Mitchell in the postseason, I mean, hey, we've all seen what Bo Levi Mitchell does in the postseason every single year. He's a two-time MOP and two-time Grey Cup champion for a reason. And aside from that, I think I think the Calgary Stampeders have the better offensive line, and they certainly have the better running game. Kadeem Carey has been an excellent, excellent player. In my opinion, the best player on the Calgary Stampeders this season. And Dedrick Mills, their backup running back, came in and rushed for 100 yards over Ottawa while Carey was out with the hamstring injury this past week. So to me, when you look at the playoffs, it's about running the ball. It's about veteran leadership, being there and doing that. Calgary has that in spades over BC. So I think BC will win this week, but I also think the Bombers would rather see BC in the postseason, maybe more so than the Stamps.
Hey, John, just before we go, and thanks again for the great conversation, fill people in on what they can look to enjoy at 3 Down Nation heading into Thursday's rematch with the Alouettes for Winnipeg.
Well, we're doing our picks, as always, on Thursday mornings. We've got lots of our guys. We're all over 500, of course, for picks straight up. Some of us are doing extremely well. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them. I'm kind of middle of the pack. But against the spread, we've been making picks all season. I think our guy Santino Filoso is 22-11 or something like that against the spread so far. So if you want to make some money and you're looking to tail somebody's picks, make sure to check out 3 Down Nation on Thursday mornings. You might just make a little bit of coin if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, favorites 4-0 last week against the spread. So hold your nose, take the chalk, and we'll see what happens. John, thanks for doing this, man.
My pleasure, Hustler. Anytime.
At John D. Hodge on Twitter. Make sure you're following John and checking out all the great CFL content over at 3 Down Nation. All right, we'll talk a little more CFL, but definitely get into the latest on the Winnipeg Jets with Jeff Hamilton coming up in just a second. Before we do that, hydration break on WST. And of course, when we're thinking water and water services Winnipeg, we think about our friends at Culligan, who have been doing it for over 65 years as a family-owned business here in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba. They've got water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Whether it's for the home, the cottage, or work, Culligan has you covered. Give them a call at 204-694-5180. Visit them at 1200 Sargent Avenue, or find out everything Culligan can do for you online at drinkculligan.com. Our friends at Royal Sports are certainly ready for the upcoming season of the National Football League, a new NFL gear coming in by the week, and that's good because he had the Hall of Fame game on Thursday. Preseason football is back, and we'll be doing fantasy drafts and more in the next few weeks, getting ready for NFL kickoff. When it comes to merchandise for your favorite team, whether it be the NFL, the Bombers in the CFL, Jets in the NHL, NBA, Blue Jays, Major League Baseball, Royal Sports has the best selection in town, one of the best selections in the entire country. But it's so much more than just merchandise. Tons of bikes, an expanded fitness section, hockey, soccer, baseball, even tennis and disc golf. It's all there at Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. And make sure to follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. Well, hey, Thursday night, you know where to be. That is IG Field. And you're going to want to maybe try the great taste of the Canadian Club and ginger ale if you haven't already. It is the drink of the summer, the pre-mixed, ready-to-drink CC and ginger, available in 6-packs at your favorite beer store or local Manitoba Liquor Mart. Also available along with the entire family Canadian Club products at IG Field on Thursday and all stadium events as the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Try CC and ginger today and make sure to grab a couple at the game on Thursday night. And hey, a big shout out to our friends at Knott Autocorp as well. If you're thinking about getting into a new vehicle heading into the fall, start your search with the experts over at Knott. Why not get into the car of your dreams at a great price with the help of the Knott team? Check out everything they've got on the lot. And if there's a particular vehicle you're looking for, talk to the experts there. They'll find it, get it for you here at the best possible price over at Knott, Waverly and McGillivray, as I mentioned, and find out more on everything they've got going and the new Winnipeg Car Lab online at knott.ca. All right, let's bring in Jeff Hamilton, who's back from his travels and joined us now on WST. Hammer, what's going on? How are you?
Not much, Huss. Good to be on. Glad to be home for the foreseeable future here. Looks like I'll be in town for a couple weeks after what's been a couple busy months of traveling and covering sports. I know, tough business, but all in all, pretty happy, and still day 3 of 3 days off. So back at it tomorrow, and looking forward to chatting Bombers, Jets, and whatever else comes across our table here.
Good stuff. We'll certainly get to the Bombers and the Canadian football. We were just talking about that in the CFL with John Hodge. Figured we'd start off talking Jets with you. And let's get to the immediate news, the weekend signing of Mason Appleton. I'd said, on this show, I didn't think there was any chance this was going to be getting to arbitration. But they did end up getting an extra year. Mason Appleton gets a nice bump to $2 million a season and $2.25 in years 2 and 3 of the deal. And obviously we'll get a great opportunity to play, I'd imagine, some significant minutes again with Adam Lowry, the guy that he's had his best success in the National Hockey League of. What did you think of the number? What did you think of the term? And where does that leave the Jets going forward?
Yeah, look, I like Mason Appleton. I think he plays the game hard. I think he cares. I think he's got a better scoring touch than his stats suggest. Now, I don't know if that's something you're going to sell to fans early on, but I think this is a commitment that, he'll be happy with, to be at home. As you mentioned, it's a bump in pay. He's a consistent player on the ice as far as defensive, defensive play as well as offensively. Again, the numbers aren't there, so you're not going to sit there and brag about how he fills the net, but he plays a valuable role on the Jets shutdown line. Now, what will that line look like this season? Beyond him and Adam Lowry, who knows? But certainly a guy who cares and a guy who's focused, and got rewarded for that with a bit of a pay bump and a bit of some length there, as you mentioned, for a 3-year deal.
I was just talking with Remis beforehand. I mean, I guess right now we have to talk about the possibility that the top 6 in the majority of this club essentially comes back as is. And if that is the case, for sake of argument, let's assume that Dubois and Scheifele are your top 2 centers. You've got Nikolai Ehlers and Kyle Connor as your top 2 wingers. You've got Blake Wheeler if he's still in the mix. I'd imagine part of that top 6. And Cole Perfetti, if healthy, I think gets an opportunity to play there as well. And there's not really any other high-end offensive players that would sort of be in the mix. Those are the guys. The third line was in flux throughout last season, and a big part of it was that Adam Lowry, was playing with Christian Vesalainen, who just never really got going and felt comfortable. And I think that really had an effect, especially on all of their numbers in the first week of the first half of the season before Lowry sort of broke out post All-Star break with different line mates. If it's Lowry and it's Appleton, is Morgan Barron the guy that gets the opportunity on the third line? Or is this a wasted conversation because we have to think that by the time training camp gets going, there'll be another player or two in the mix that may have a line in on that job?
Well, I think if we've learned anything this offseason, Huss, it's that we can't assume anything. So as far as who fits in on that line, yeah, Morgan Barron could be that guy. I mean, he certainly adds a bit more of a scoring punch than, say, a Jansen Harkins. But a Jansen Harkins is a workhorse, right? I mean, he's kind of that water beetle out on the ice. He can cover a lot of space and might be in line for that shutdown role there. It's interesting, right? This team has been putting out what their best efforts of having a top 6 two lines of scoring, that third line of a shutdown role, and then that fourth line kind of, maybe they play, maybe they don't, maybe they score, probably won't. But in this situation, I don't really know. I mean, the assumption here is they're going to load their top 2 lines again. I think when you take a guy out of the mix like Paul Stastny, Paul Stastny doesn't have a contract for next season. Who knows what his future holds here? But when you take him out of the mix, it kind of reverts back to that solid top 6. As you mentioned, I see Cole Perfetti gain a big opportunity there in the top 6, maybe even potentially on the top line if you want to connect him with Kyle Connor and Pierre-Luc Dubois, if you want to put him on that right wing, and then have Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, and Nikolai Ehlers on that second line. That's not necessarily what I'm advocating for or suggesting, but it's a possibility nonetheless. And then that leaves you with the third line of Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton, and then a tryout really for those bottom 4 positions on forward. I mean, David Gustafsson still doesn't have a contract yet. I'm sure that will get done in due time here, but it really does feel like, as you mentioned off the top of your show, I think it really does feel like we're trending towards, the longer we take here, the more likely it is that the Jets are going to be running it back with who they have. So I just don't see with this group. But that being said, I mean, the big thing is that was kind of when Paul Maurice was running the show. It was almost predictable, right? I mean, you could probably go back to the, Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler line when things were going, well, what does Rick Bowness, what does he see with this lineup? What does he, how does he want to orchestrate his lines? We know he's more of a shutdown guy. We know he, emphasizes the defensive side of the game first. Maybe he does spread things out. Maybe we do see, a bit of a different approach at forwards. But until we see Rick Bowness with the players on the ice, we don't really know what exactly we'll tell. And the other thing too is that, I certainly think it's true that the longer we wait here, the longer time goes on into the summer, as we inch towards September and training camps, it's less likely something, significant is going to get done, but I don't think it's impossible. So, as much as there's been, a lot of inaction here, we're talking about a Mason Appleton kind of, negating arbitration is the big news here for the last little while. And it's true. There's still potential for something significant to happen, for something to, for a team finally to maybe that they were talking to earlier in this process, earlier in the offseason, comes back as they try to make final decisions. But, again, to say for a third time, it seems less likely as time moves on. And if it doesn't happen here in the next, couple weeks, I'm not sure you're going to be seeing some late fireworks at the end of August heading into training camp just weeks away.
Just back to Wheeler for a minute. And I've sort of said, I understand, that the team's been shopping him and trying to make some sort of a move. And it sounded like he was in on it too. But I really don't think that's a hockey decision at all. I think I have a hard time imagining a scenario where the Jets get better talent-wise by trading Blake Wheeler. But I think it's part of a much bigger thing that we talked about throughout last season, really the last few years, is the culture, the leadership group, the guys that are taking the oxygen in the room, if you will. And so I guess we'll see what happens. But presently consumed, like Mull mentioned, what are the chances, or what if Appleton takes Wheeler's spot on the second line? Now, I'm not sure Mason Appleton has the offense in his game to play consistently in the top six. But it does, it opens up some interesting questions as to how Rick Bowness goes in. If all those guys are there, how he approaches, first of all, does he have a captain? Is Blake Wheeler that guy? And I would think there'd be the possibility that Wheeler could potentially play further down in the lineup, but I think you have to have a guy that's better than him to go and do that, and I'm not sure they have that on the roster right now.
Well, I think that's the
at
conundrum
full
there.
health.
And I don't think that Blake Wheeler is an automatic, it's been a bit of a narrative, right? That he's better served to play deeper in the lineup, that he's, with his age and his skill set, that perhaps, he could benefit from playing third line minutes just to his body and to his competition. But as you mentioned, I mean, I don't know if Mason Appleton, if he's the next guy, you're tapping a shoulder to be an offensive outburst on your top six. I don't know if that's going to work. At the same time, Huss, I mean, we've seen this on several teams, contending teams. Not many teams load their best six forwards in their top two lines. I'm not saying no teams do it. Certainly that's been the case here in Winnipeg and in other areas around the NHL. But a lot of the teams that have drivers, and that's the key word here, right? Drivers, having guys who can make players around them better. That's why it was such a benefit to have, when things were rolling, to have a guy like Evgeny Svechnikov on the top line with Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor, because he was able to keep pace with those guys, speed-wise, play-wise, and they made him a better player. And so if you can do something like that and not have to load all of your top players in your top six, then that is an advantage. An advantage in having a guy as skilled as Blake Wheeler playing on your third line. I mean, those are the benefits of having, guys that are, not necessarily your top end players, aren't making top end money, playing on some, in some top end positions. And again, we've seen that around the league. Sidney Crosby's done that with players in the past, guys who are drivers on the line. I think it's determining who are your drivers. We're how many years into this, and we're still wondering if Mark Scheifele's a driver. Is he a skilled player? There's absolutely no doubt about it. Go check his stat sheet. He scored, amongst the top players in the league over the last several years. But does he make his wingers better, or is there too much onus on wingers to make him better? A la Andrew Koch, who was often put on his line to cover some of the defensive deficiencies and help him in that regard. Whereas again, those driving players often as centermen do those things for their wingers. So I think it really is going to be interesting this season to see what Rick Bowness sees in this group, and perhaps more importantly, or definitely more importantly, what he can get out of this group and get them to buy in, because I think that's been the big issue, particularly over last season, is buying into a philosophy, believing that this is a recipe for success. We went through 82 games last season, and I don't think we really saw an identity with the Jets. It was almost, different from week to week. And certainly with everything they dealt with, whether that be injuries or COVID and stuff, lineup changes were definitely a constant, but you never really saw them fall back on a certain style of play. Now, will Rick Bowness be able to do that? And where will he have guys to execute that plan? Well, again, that's wait to be seen, but I'm intrigued certainly at what he has in store. I mean, just going back to Blake, I don't know if that's a move that many head coaches would have the, if you will, balls to do, is to make your captain. And that's the other big question, as you alluded to, is if Blake Wheeler comes back, does he come back with a letter on his chest? Well, I can't see him not. I just can't see him getting losing a letter in that room, particularly with a new coach. I mean, that would be, you would argue that would be the ample time to make such a change. With the dynamics in that room, if that's something that you want to do, and have a guy who's been a leader for so many years on this team all of a sudden take not just a backup role, and as far as ice time, but also in leadership, that's going to be an interesting conversation, whichever direction that heads. But certainly, I'm interested to see what Rick Bowness does with this group. I'm interested to see the philosophy in which he wants to instill, and really having the opportunity to finally take a look at his roster and see where things fit. Because right now, I mean, you can make the argument that this team isn't better than they were last year, and we all saw the results then. So what's to suggest that there's brighter days ahead if nothing's going to get done from this point to puck drop in October?
Hammer, if Wheeler does come back, how do you think he handles it right off the bat? Are we going to get another sit-down legendary leader interview that they did a couple years ago? Is he going to show up and essentially just not address last season? Basically, hey, this is a new year. We're moving on going forward. Or are there things that he needs to do, not even necessarily for the fan base, for the fans, but for the team itself to try to start off on a much better foot than the way things ended last year?
Well, I guess it depends on whether he shows up to camp. If they make a decision beforehand, that would be an awkward situation. If they hadn't made a decision on who their captain was, then you would just assume it's the same captain. I don't know why you would do that in training camp. As for how Blake would react, I have no idea. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, Blake's kind of at both ends of the spectrum. He can be upset pretty easily. He can be annoyed by coverage, negative coverage against him, and he can handle it in ways we've seen him handle it, in the past. And he's at the same time, he's also one of the more articulate, if not the most articulate players on the team. So maybe he does have a bit of a thought process over the summer, and in the event that he's no longer the captain, and even if he is, maybe he takes a different approach to things. Maybe last year, maybe if anybody needs a clean slate, whether it's in Winnipeg or elsewhere, maybe it is Blake Wheeler. Maybe he looked at what was a very challenging year. I mean, we often heard Blake talk last season. He'd allude to things. He wouldn't be specific, and I wouldn't blame him for that, because I don't know if some of this internal stuff is necessarily anyone's business outside of the locker room, as much as we try to get it. But he did allude several times last season about it being one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult seasons in his career. And that isn't just on ice stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot, guys are going through a lot with COVID and the shutdowns. And then, you see a lot of players now in the off season change different places based on family. And there's stuff that's become, prioritized higher than dollars and cents. And I think that if you look at his season last year, maybe he does view it as a bit of a reset, and maybe he feel, as you mentioned 2 years ago in that interview, I mean, he acknowledged about how he was tougher on the younger guys, had a bit of an epiphany. I don't know what that epiphany would look like this off season, if it's even necessary, but I think either way, I'm not going to guess on how he's going to handle questions, whether he's wearing the C or not, but I expect him, to address some of the issues, obviously, over the off season, some of the questions, certainly around a potential trade that he's reported to be at one point was helping facilitate.
Well, it's funny you say that. You mentioned the word epiphany. I mean, I think that epiphany might have happened in the off season when all of a sudden it was widely reported that he was more than willing to take a trade to another team. And if that doesn't happen, that's just another layer on top of everything that happened last year. And obviously, it'll make for a very interesting beginning of training camp, and the lineup of the local media figuring out who they're asking for first on day number one, I think will be quite funny as well. We've talked both on the show and off air. I mean, there's still a lot of work being done. I was going through the numbers this morning of teams that are at or over the cap, and just thinking about what we've seen with the Pacioretty deal, with the Bjorkstrand deal, with the difficulty that the Jets have had in putting together a deal with Blake Wheeler. The more and more I think about it, and we've talked a lot about some guys that are still available as free agency, and Evan Rodriguez, as Sonny Milano, I'm starting to think, Jeff, that it might be more likely that the Winnipeg Jets wait this out, get closer to camp, and try and take advantage of the fact that their limited cap space could bring in a player that another team is desperate to do something with to get cap compliant. And there might be more opportunity in getting players right now under contract from another team, and the value that might be to the team to get that guy off the books as the best route for Kevin Cheveldayoff to go to add some pieces to this lineup. Are you feeling me on that, or is it more a bigger trade or adding something through free agency?
Yeah, you know what, Huss, at this point, it's really hard to tell. Like, I honestly believe that, as fans, get more and more frustrated throughout the offseason for a lack of change, I truly believe, at least in the people I've chatted to around the league and whatnot, that there have been efforts to do things. There have been efforts to, bring in talent, to ship out talent, to change some of the things that we've obviously been talking about for weeks and now months as we inch closer to a new season. Whether you look at the times in which you thought maybe things were possible, right? Obviously the draft, the Jets were, rumored heavily to be involved or interested in a trade. on the draft floor. We all knew Pierre-Luc Dubois' status. We knew about, what his agent was saying. And we also know that his interest in testing free agency in a couple of years. So you look at that time frame, you looked at the start of free agency. I mean, those were, if not the first day of free agency, at least the first week as teams, went out, because obviously there was a handful of guys that teams went out, went after, and only one team wins, right, in those deals. So you're often left with several other teams, or at least a few other teams that didn't get their guys. And so you look at, you'd expect them to kind of rethink their plans or look down their plan B, C, D, whatever, and see if anybody on the list of the Jets who, underproduce but have a very good roster on paper, and whether that's a Blake Wheeler, whether that's Pierre-Luc Dubois, whether that's a Mark Scheifele, whether that's a Connor Hellebuyck, and I know some of those names people would not be happy seeing go the other way. Kyle Connor's another one, right? I mean, guys that you look at guys who either have expiring contracts, like Mark Scheifele, like Pierre-Luc Dubois, like Blake Wheeler, like Connor Hellebuyck, that if you don't think that this team's going to win in the next 2 years and you don't think you're going to re-up them, well, suddenly teams start looking to see if those guys are in play, right? And then I mentioned Kyle Connor, and I'm sure there's a massive gasp there. But if you look around the league and you're trying to make a big change, who would bring back more in return than a Kyle Connor? Now, again, I'm not advocating trading Kyle Connor. He's a 100-point winger. He's up, he's a goal machine. You need goals, on this team. But I also look at a guy like Rick Bowness, who's a defensively minded guy who, possibly doesn't work for a game like Kyle Connor. Now, again, that's not suggesting Kyle Connor would be upset with Rick Bowness as a coach, but there's lots of things to take into consideration that other teams take into consideration to make calls. So I just, at this point in time, I mean, could there be something at the end of the summer where, another player is disgruntled, or a team's trying to reach the cap floor, and there's salary to take on or things to do. I'm certainly not ruling it out, but you'd have to imagine that would exist right now in the dog days of summer, and not just 3 or 4 weeks from now as we inch closer to a season. So, I mean, that's an all roundabout way of saying I have no idea as far as, what might be in store, what would be at play. But I have seen, we have seen a couple different milestones, a couple different dates that would have expected, or at least would have been the best situation to make a trade, pass us by.
Yeah, no, it is a great point. And I guess moving into September and October, if we assume that there are minimal changes to this roster, and the bottom line is you're back with Scheifele, with Wheeler, with Hellebuyck, with 2 years left on their season under team control. We'll include Dubois in that group as well. Do you think that the first half of the season will basically tell the story about the way the Jets move forward? Because, I mean, I sort of believe that this is a 1 year window now. It's not a 2 year window, because that final year, I mean, unless you are literally knocking on the door as a legit Stanley Cup contender and are willing to run the risk of running it out and losing a number of key players for absolutely nothing in free agency, I would think that you need to act earlier. And if things go, if we don't see the turnaround and the team is average, even a borderline playoff team like that might make it in. Do you think we see some of those moves that maybe some people thought would happen this summer at the deadline next year, where teams would be paying a premium for not only that player at the deadline, but one more year of team control at all, with the exception of Wheeler, pretty reasonable numbers?
You have to think absolutely. I mean, the thing is I like your thought process, Huss, in that I don't think you look at it like a 2 year window here. I think you look at it as a 1 year window and see what happens. As we've talked about in the past, I mean, this time last season, it was the summer of Chevy. It was, this is team's a contender. This is, this team's built to compete, that they're built to go deep into the playoffs. And we just didn't see that happen. Now, there's certainly factors at play there. I don't love the excuse of a tough schedule, but there were at times where the Jets had one. They certainly dealt with COVID issues. They dealt with injuries, to be sure. So maybe there is a hope there after, like I said, I think there have been efforts to change it. But we also know that the Jets don't like getting ripped off. That the Jets want to be making trades that look good and are good for their roster. So, if they do have to run it back here, I think you do give it, I don't even say 1 year, but yet 1 year window, in the sense that if you are rolling by trade deadline, you're obviously not going to trade anybody, but I think there's going to be some hard decisions to make if you go back into this season, stumble out of the gate like we saw last year, get behind the 8 ball come trade deadline. How can you make the argument, A, that anyone is that you're going to make the playoffs in a year time, or B, that anybody who's on an expiring contract the following year is going to want to return? Look, Winnipeg is a good place to play in a lot of ways. It's a hockey mad city, but you need this team. You need to, whether you're in Florida or whether you're in Winnipeg or wherever you are, a lot of the fun comes from winning. And if you're not winning, you're not having a ton of fun. So it's safe to say, the Jets are coming off their least fun season since they came back. And if they have another one of those, I don't think you're going to convince players, that have wanted to maybe leave or test free agency once their contract is up, and that's their right. The only way you do convince them is if you start getting wins. So I think that, to your original point, Huss, that the trade deadline will be a pivotal moment in next season if they go back with the same club, because they're going to get a good idea by that time if they're in or out. And even if they're hovering around, a playoff bubble team again, I think those questions become, serious questions, and you need to look at your future. And I look at Calgary. I mean, they were able to get rid of some key guys and not miss a beat. Is that something Winnipeg has the potential to do? Who knows? But whatever it is, I think you need to look in the mirror if you get to that point next year at the trade deadline and you're not closer to a playoff spot if you don't have to make some drastic measures, many of which I think people thought would have happened over the summer here.
Hey, a big shout out to WST chat insider Bailey Weeb, who broke the news and gave us the link. How about this? Dave Lowry is back in the National Hockey League.
There you go. Jungle
Dave signs with the Seattle Kraken as an NHL assistant. Ron Francis, quite excited, says he's had a long, successful NHL playing career, significant coaching experience at the NHL and junior ranks. Dave's a valuable addition to Dave Hackstoll's staff. Happy that Dave Lowry got another opportunity to get in. And I expected that would happen at some point. I didn't know how soon it would happen. I've been pretty clear. I think he got a pretty raw deal here. There's a number of players that didn't seem to buy in. There was a big hangover since Maurice leaving. But it is nice to see him getting that opportunity because I have a feeling he'll get a more fair opportunity in Seattle as far as the hand that he was dealt last season by the Winnipeg Jets in the aftermath of Maurice packing up and leaving town.
Yeah, didn't Dave have the opportunity to reapply for his job this year? I mean, what happened there? But no,
it's a short interview.
If you look at, I agree with you. I mean, I think Dave Lowry's he's a good man. I think he's certainly an experienced coach, as you mentioned, at the junior and NHL levels. He's a guy who's been there, done that, so he has the respect in that part of coaching. And I do think he's a good coach, and I think he cared a lot last year, and I think he was in, I don't want to necessarily classify it as an impossible decision or position, but pretty close. In that, players were shell shocked that Paul Maurice was gone. So I don't think he had much of a heads up, as far as that, and then taking over and trying to, be the guy and be the voice and, do what he thought was best for the team. I think there was a bit of a Paul Maurice hangover there. And certainly as we saw the season go on, guys were not playing, within his system, and that, looked inevitable that he wouldn't be back. But I do know that the Jets certainly had a lot of respect for Dave Lowry. Obviously would have wished that things went better for him, but by the end of the season, it was pretty clear that he wasn't the guy to come back, and that's the unfortunate part about these things. Sometimes is that the guy running the room is often the first to go, because especially when you don't have a contract for the next season.
No, to be honest with you, I mean, I think it was insane to begin with to have a guy coaching a team where his son is on it right now. I mean, and not that was the reason for it, but it just. Hey, whatever. They got thrown a curveball. He was certainly probably the most qualified guy on the staff to be the guy that took over for Paul Maurice, but that didn't make it a prime situation, I think, for anybody involved. And, we saw what the results were. Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press is with us. Let's quickly transition over to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I know you were out at the game. It's kind of a wild game against Montreal. I mean, John Hodge described as like a a lion or a bear playing with its meat before they eat it. I kind of thought of it as more like a WWE match where they go through the 15 minutes of back and forth, and the ref says, okay, guys, it's time to finish them. And then the champ goes in and just basically takes care of things the way they did in the fourth quarter. Man, no. 9-0, the running game coming around, doing it without some key players. Greg Ellingson back at practice today. I mean, it has been a dream start of the season, but the first half is not what the goal was. It was to get that home playoff game. But man, you couldn't ask for a much better first half of the season. And the fact that they haven't had a bye yet, Jeff, I mean, they've got this opportunity to go to 10-0 at home, 5 more home games, 3 more road games after this, and 3 byes. They've really gone through the most difficult and challenging parts of the season and passed every test so far.
Yeah, I mean, just to use your wrestling reference, Huss, I think, even though it was a tied game after 3 quarters, it still felt like the Montreal Alouettes was the wrestler wearing the Speedo with the Jets, with the Bombers being the main event, if you will. And I think it played out that way. It certainly is an impressive run here. I mean, what can you say that hasn't already been said about this Bombers team? Whether it's their resiliency, whether it's their level of coaching, whether it's the leadership group, whether it's finding ways to win in games that maybe they aren't supposed to win. And I always say this, I've been saying this for weeks now, that, is very much like the Calgary Stampeders were when they were doing their 10 years of leading the standings. It's they find ways to win and find different ways to win. I mean, if you look at the season, you look at the front 9 here, if you will, it was pretty slow coming out of the gate for the offense. I mean, we were writing constantly about the defense picking up the slack, and people had a lot of doubts on whether this defense could replicate what they did in 2021 again this season. Well, we've seen them not only play incredibly well, but they have a better record than they did at this point last season, and doing so with a solid defensive effort. But we've also seen the offense come to life. Zach Collaros has been, he started to take over games, and the offense started to find the end zone a lot more consistently, to the point where we're now talking about Zach being an MOP guy. And I know you're talking about Nathan Rourke, and you certainly, I'd put him ahead of Zach at this point, just given what he's been able to do. But Zach and the offense have been incredibly talented. I mean, they go through injuries. Nick Dembski misses a few games. Greg Ellingson, who's now back at practice this week after missing the last few games, he's back in the mix, and they've been able to do it with weapons like Dalton Schoen, with Rasheed Bailey came up with a good, has come up at times. We've seen, we've just seen talented players come and get the job done. Janarian Grant last week. I mean, I know you were ranking your players. I'd probably have him at the top. I mean, he had a really crazy stat line to go with, his return touchdown, I think a reception, a couple different runs. He had 2 defensive tackles, one of which I think would have been a sure touchdown for Montreal had he not made it, maybe both of those. But just guys are stepping up. And feeling a part of this, and that's got to be a great thing to be a Bomber fan. As you mentioned, Huss, I mean, this back 9 here. I know you asked John, and I got asked this morning. I was on a panel for the Ticats audio group talking about whether this team could go 18-0. I think it'll be very tough. I don't think it will happen, but I don't think it will happen because we're going to get to a point where the Bombers have run the table to the degree where they like last season not a month off, but have locked in their position with a month to go and just won't be playing their starters. And they don't care about that stuff. They don't care about the perfect season. They care about the perfect ending, and that's the Grey Cup. But to watch this team week in and week out, and the other thing about it, and especially when you look at the CFL this season, it's not just an unbelievable team. It's not just great coaching. It's good people. You look across the league with teams doing stupid crap all the time. And, I love some of the drama, just to be sure. But, I heard people describe them as the big bad Bombers this morning in that panel. And I laugh because, they're the big bad Bombers because they've won the last 2 Grey Cups and they've opened the season a perfect 9-0. But they might just be the most likable team in the entire CFL. And so certainly great ambassadors for the city. Certainly putting strong efforts on and off the field to, and when I say off, I don't just mean work in the community. I mean literally off the field, spending tons of time going through film. This is a prepared team. This is a good culture here, one that players want to be a part of, one that players want to go above and beyond when they do their preparation, and certainly one that has seen the results of all that work and effort pay out the last two now 2.5 seasons of brilliance for the Blue and Gold.
Oh, I see Love Chat XYZ, best adult dating site, has jumped into the chat. It seems like they always want to jump on every time you join us today on the show, Jeff.
Better delete my Google search. Really, my history here. Uh-oh.
One of the other things we touched on with John was this game this weekend between BC and Calgary. I mean, listen, I'm usually more focused in on the Bomber games, but I'll watch them all. I'm really excited for this game. It's essentially a pick'em. Calgary, a half-point favorite at home. What do you think about this matchup? And I'll ask you what I asked John. With the focus for the Bombers on clinching first place and having that West final, who's a bigger threat outdoors in the cold in November to the Blue Bombers between BC or Calgary in your mind?
So as far as the winner this week, I mean, just looking at what we saw last week, BC coming off an absolute dominating display. Now it was against the Elks. They've continued to be a tire fire into this season. I think they had 12 new guys in their lineup in that game, but Nathan Rourke made quick work of them pretty early to the point where probably didn't even need to play any of the second half. So just given the way BC played and Calgary, I mean, I thought given the circumstances they were under with injuries, with Dave Dickinson not being on the sidelines, calling plays for because he was in COVID protocol. All things considered, impressive win, I guess, but it just, I think they were lucky to play Ottawa. I was talking to Ted Wyman about this earlier in the week. It's crazy to think that Nathan Rourke and Caleb Evans are in the same league. Just watching that last week's game, but I definitely have BC as the winner against Calgary. I think Calgary was a bit shell shocked from back-to-back losses to Winnipeg, but they are a tough beat at home. So regardless of who I think is going to win, what I would say is it's going to be a close one. As for who's a bigger threat to the Bombers, I think I caught John and he said Calgary. I tend to agree with that. I think there's still, after a 10-year dominance of the Stampeders and some of the history that these two teams have, I think there's a healthy respect for the Stampeders. Now, that's not to suggest there isn't a healthy respect for the BC Lions or anyone else in the CFL for that matter. We've certainly you aren't 9-0 in a season without respecting your opponent. So I don't think it's a lack of respect. I just think it's an added amount of respect for Calgary. And so I think all things considered, we're looking at most likely Winnipeg claiming the East, getting that one game to get an opportunity to play in Regina for their third consecutive Grey Cup. But I for some reason, Calgary Stampeders seem to have a bit of a special place in the Bombers' minds that I think that BC doesn't. But I think both will be a challenging out. I think it's going to be an incredible whatever way the West finishes up. I think it's going to be an incredible playoff road. Starting with the semifinal right into the final, and then of course the Grey Cup is always a fun one to watch.
Tell you what, I don't think either of those teams are coming to Winnipeg and winning in November. I asked which has a better chance of doing it. I think we can agree with that one. I don't think any of them end with the other team in the winner's circle. And the wild thing about this is if they can get to 10-0, I mean, still with 3 byes left with 5 home games, I mean, it won't. I mean, assuming. I guess BC could just continue keeping pace. And if they have one loss and you get down to those final games of the regular season, it could be in the mix. But we'll see how BC does with this test in Calgary, a test that the Bombers have already passed so far this season. Hey, just before we go, how the hell does Edmonton have 2 wins, first of all? And do they win again this season? I mean, every time I turn the TV on and watch this team, first of all, half the guys are different than the last time they played. And I know Chris Jones has some weird ways of going about things. But, I mean, it's like they played a glorified preseason for the first half of this year, Jeff, with all the player movement. And I don't know. I mean, am I the only one thing? I don't see them getting any better.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I used to think that there was a Chris Jones effect that, as time went on, this team would be, dominant or get better or whatever. We've seen what he's been able to do in this league, with several teams in the past, and just his fingerprints are on a lot of successful clubs over his time in the CFL. But I don't know, this season and this Elks team and what he's doing with bringing in guys and how he's trying to reinvent, reinvent the quarterback position. It's like he's trying to create a new league and trying to, put his mark on it, and it's just not working week in and week out. And then you have Victor Hsu claiming 4 straight victories. So it's a bit of a disaster over there. In that maybe Chris Jones's effect isn't there. I thought it was fascinating. I'll bring up one story when we were in Winnipeg, and I think there's a healthy disdain for the leadership of the Elks and the leadership of the Bombers. Let's just go there. Because I think there was truth to it when we asked, and we asked Chris Jones about, Kenny Lawler coming over and bringing kind of the culture of Winnipeg and just different guys and different, kind of centered around culture. And he kind of, smacked that question out of the reporter's mouth and was like, it's not about team wins. It's not about collective team culture. It's about individual players and bringing their best every day to be a cumulative effect of all of them. And I just couldn't help but to think that, when I compare it to a place like Winnipeg, it is about holding each other accountable for each other. It's not about holding, yourself accountable and that's going to follow into play. And I just feel like, maybe there isn't, because I also know a lot of players love playing for Chris Jones. So it's, part of it, I think, is him trying to figure out what he has there. And I don't think he's looking at this season as a Grey Cup winner. I think he is looking as building. I don't know how you could have Trey Ford as your starting quarterback and expect to win the Grey Cup this year. And that's nothing against Trey Ford. I'm sure he, potential to be a great quarterback. I just don't think a rookie, his rookie season's the year to do it. But I don't know. Like we'll see what happens. It feels like week in and week out, I go, well, it's Chris Jones' run team. So clearly they're going to get better, but we just see them, arguably take 2 big steps back with getting a beat down against BC. So I'm with you in the sense that I think this is, I think it's a foregone conclusion, even as they look at 10 more games left in their season, that the Elks are going to be pretty comfortable in the basement of the West as other teams have already passed them.
Fun chat as always. What do you got cooking when you get back to work this week?
I got my CFL rundown column, I think, tomorrow, just back on the Bombers beat and covering an unbeaten team and keeping the ears and eyes open for any potential Jets news. So just another typical week that you can find my work at the Free Press.
Oh, Thursday's looking nice too. Sunny and 24. Perfect summer day for the Bombers' next home game. First time since they've played at home since that thriller against the Calgary Stampeders on the 15th of July. Hammer, always a pleasure, man. Have a great night, and hopefully we'll catch up later on this week.
As is always the case, fun to be on. Thanks to you, Huss. Thanks to Remo, and thanks to the commenters. I hope you guys have a great rest of the show.
Take it easy. There it is, Jeff Hamilton at Jeff K. Hamilton on Twitter, and make sure to check out all of his work coming up this week following the Bombers leading up to the game and post-game at the Winnipeg Free Press. And hey, speaking of that game, as I just mentioned, the weather is looking perfect. It's been a minute since the Bombers have played at home. They haven't lost this season. It will be the place to be on Thursday. And before the game, if you are making it out to IG Field, make sure to come a little early and check out the Princess Auto tailgate zone outside the stadium. Great deals before the game, $5 beers, $3.50 hot dogs, $3.50 pop. Great prizes from the Princess Auto team. DJ Finesse will be spinning, doing his DJ thing, getting the beats going before the game. Certainly the place to be. Get there early. Check out the Princess Auto tailgate zone. And, of course, Princess Auto, proud sponsor of the Bombers, and the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. But as always, you can shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Great weekend. Enjoyed a few Little Brown Jugs in the boat out at Aikens Lake. And I know many of you had a few Little Brown Jugs on the weekend. Nothing better to pick up for barbecue than maybe the summer variety pack with 4 great summer beers from Little Brown Jug. Or go with the tried and true iconic beer of Little Brown Jug 1919. Check it out at the brewery and tap room on William Avenue or online at littlebrownjug.ca. And hey, speaking of Little Brown Jug, mark down this date, everybody. September 1st, around 7:30 o'clock at Little Brown Jug will be our first ever Winnipeg Sports Talk, Little Brown Jug Sports Trivia Night, hosted by yours truly. We're going to be putting together a bunch of great questions, focusing on some local stuff, obviously NHL, football, a wide variety. So if you are a sports trivia wonk, join us that day, grab some friends, and we'll have you some information on how you can reserve a table for your group for that date in the coming days. But save the date, Thursday, September 1st, Little Brown Jug, Sports Trivia with Winnipeg Sports Talk. Hey, shout out to the Nick and Nicky DQ group. Blizzard sales are high right now. We get the blizzards in the winter, but for some reason, we still go to DQ 12 months a year, and it's because they have the best ice cream treats around, not to mention an incredible new lineup of stack burgers if you haven't tried it. And of course, the best addition to any party, a DQ ice cream cake. Nick and Nicky can help you out with that on Instagram at DQ Manitoba if you want to get something custom ordered. Or, of course, you can pop by any of the 4 Nick and Nicky DQs for ice cream treats, great burgers, fries, chicken, and more. DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. Big shout out to our friends Nick and Nicky for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. All right, let's get Michael Remis back in here. Remo, great chats with John Hodge, with Jeff Hamilton. I know the game was on Thursday night, but I still had lots to talk about with the Bombers' 9th win of the season. And holy smokes, I'm looking forward to the rematch, and mostly just looking forward to getting back to IG Field and watching this team do it in person after so many road games over the course of the past month and a half.
Yeah, it's going to be great to have full barn. Sorry, they don't call it a barn. What do you call a stadium? Like, what's the equivalent? You call an arena a barn? What do you call a stadium?
Park.
I don't know if it's a park. Field? I don't know. Anyways, the last one here was that game against Calgary, which we can all agree was one of the games of the season. We'll have to see how it goes. This Thursday against the Alouettes. I do want to say, you guys didn't get to my 2 favorite debates of the CFL this season. I mean, can we really call Nathan Rourke the MOP when he's just beating up on the lowly Elks? Like, don't include these Elks outlier games in his full stat line. I mean, I'm going to agree the guy's awesome, but...
The irony of the whole thing is that Zach Collaros completed 7 passes against the Elks, but they did win by double digits and cover the spread, so keep that in mind. The ultimate victory.
Yeah, I agree he's like awesome. I watched the game. It was incredible. But I think at times, like, were the Elks even trying to play defense? It was like they're playing NFL blitz and they're just like, all right, we're doing suicide. Everyone just go get the quarterback. And well, like they had given up trying to cover anyone by the end. It was so stupid. Hey, I had Nathan Rourke in fantasy, so I was pumped, but I was stupidly didn't take Rhymes. I tinkered him out. But,
so did everybody. Everybody.
And look, one bird. I know Collaros had a bad game against Edmonton, but I don't know. He's just beating against the Bombers. He didn't have a great game. He looked human other times. So maybe he just has Edmonton's number. As far as Calgary versus BC, Bo Levi Mitchell, man, like he's so, I want to say done, but he just isn't the guy of the last couple of years. He was never like a great stat line quarterback where he's going to throw for 300 yards every game. But in 7 games this year, he's got, 7 touchdown passes and 4 picks. Trevor Harris has as many touchdown passes as him. He just isn't the guy anymore. They give it to Mayer. He's looked really good. I mean, I watched that game against Ottawa. If you were struggling that hard against the Ottawa Red Black, who've looked awful and allowed a lot of guys to pass against them, you can't move the ball.
Hey, I'll say the same thing I did for Zach Collaros in Edmonton. They won by double digits and they covered on the road. Should be enough to get through. And listen, I mean, I'm not a big Bo Levi Mitchell guy, and I was sort of with you, especially after week 1 and hearing the way Dickinson talked afterwards about Jake Mayer. But Bo Levi's got the job done so far this season. And even in their 2 losses to the Bombers, I thought those were 2 of his better games of the season. And I'll say one thing, they certainly do have a very legit running game in Kadeem Carey, who is right there near the top of CFL running back. So I don't dismiss the Stamps, and I don't dismiss Bo Levi Mitchell. However, I will dismiss them if they come to Winnipeg in November for a trip to the Grey Cup and having to go through the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the cold.
I'll say this, like against the Bombers, the game here and the other game, he looked like a different quarterback. Throwing for, where is it? Sorry. Pull it up. Yeah, he threw for what? Hold on, I had all the stats here. Where did they go? We threw for like over 300 yards or 200, 219 here? Or the second game? The first game, only 187? He was not good in that first game here. It was Kadeem Carey who was running the ball.
Was
all
he
over the
not
place.
good? Or was he the victim of the most drops by a single player in recorded CFL history, including what would have been a game-tying touchdown pass that ended up in a Blue Bomber member of the secondary's hands at the end? I mean, he was done. He was done dirty in that game, and I mean, hey, Kamar Jordan had 4 drops, including basically handing over the tying touchdown to Winnipeg. All that being said, don't sleep on Bo Levi Mitchell, but Nathan Rourke has been in another stratosphere than he and most of the other QBs. I won't include Zach Collaros in that group because I think Collaros has been brilliant when his team has needed him. And I know you mentioned that Wolodarski catch. I mean, that throw, man, he threw a couple dimes, and he's done that on a few occasions this year. Absolutely perfect passes. And that's been a big part for a team that's won all these games, and they've done it in some different ways, times with very little running game, at times with some key receivers out. And the bottom line is they just keep getting it done. And but I think, in a award that is routinely given out based on stats, I mean, the stats of Nathan Rourke are here and everyone else's start here.
At least the CFL does it right and has the award for most outstanding, i.e. the best player. It's not the best player who dragged some team to the playoffs. That's not what it is. So I want to thank the CFL for doing it right. What is it? Taylor Hall gets it for dragging New Jersey that you can't give it to Mike Trout because the Angels suck. Just give it to the guy with the best stats. And as far as quarterback efficiency, Nathan Rourke, he's 133. Zach Collaros is the next closest starter at 105. Jake Mayer in his 2 games actually is at, he's only thrown 9 passes, so I'm going to throw that out. But Collaros is in the next closest starter, 105. So Nathan Rourke, I mean, he's been pretty good, but he's padding his stats against the Elks here. I mean, it was great. It was entertaining to watch. I did enjoy the broadcast as well with Dusty and Glenn Suter and Farhan, who was wearing flip-flops on the sideline.
Yeah, hey, Farhan.
Celebrating 25 years. You can do whatever you want.
If John Liu can rock a short suit and a bow tie, let Farhan throw the flip-flops on and do his thing on the sidelines. Let's get to Cool Bet lines, and this is a perfect kind of way to kind of end up the CFL conversation by taking a look at the lines for the upcoming season. By the way, obviously I wasn't here on Thursday and Friday, but speaking of Cool Bet, if you missed it, I ended up doing a long-form interview with Mike McEwen and the new Team Mike McEwen, which is going to shock some some Manitoba curling fans, but Mike is curling out of the Granite Club in Ontario this year, along with former Winnipegger Ryan Fry, Brent Lang, as well as John Buke. And CoolBet's the title sponsor for Team Mike McEwen. We'll look forward to having Mike on throughout the season here on Winnipeg Sports Talk as well. But if you are interested in McEwen's team, you can check out the feed of the CoolBet Canada podcast, either on YouTube or wherever you get your pods, and make sure to check that out. And I can tell you that something legendary is being cooked up with CoolBet. We'll tell you more about that coming up in the coming month or so. But I can tell you something incredibly cool for us at Winnipeg Sports Talk and me personally coming up around the corner working with our friends over at CoolBet. All right, speaking of the lines, the Montreal Alouettes, 12-point underdogs in Winnipeg against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on Thursday night. Friday night, it's the rematch between the Argos and the Ticats. Nice win by Toronto, winning by a couple touchdowns. The series goes back to Hamilton in a home-and-home. Ticats 1-point favorites at home. Elks and Riders on Saturday night, the late game. Saskatchewan 5-point favorites on the road against Edmonton. And Remo, the game of the week, this one has opened as just about a pick'em. Calgary just a half-point favorite against BC. -114 for Calgary on the money line, -106 for BC. This is going to be a hell of a football game. 6 o'clock start on Saturday, and I will make sure I'm in front of a tube for that one.
I'll have to watch that. I want to see Nathan Rourke go up against some real team, because it seems like he's just beating up on the Easton Edmonton here. The only good he played Saskatchewan. He was pretty good. 27-33, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Winnipeg 16-25, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. Toronto smoked him, Edmonton smoked him. So he's pretty good. Gonna be a big test against Calgary.
Who do you like?
I am gonna say. See, Calgary played Winnipeg pretty good, but I'm pretty turned off at their performance. Like, that game was gross. The Ottawa-Calgary game. That was a tough one, man. That was a tough watch. But I'm gonna go. Okay, I'll say BC because I just dumped all over Bo Levi. So if he can prove me wrong, I will take the better quarterback, and it's clearly Nathan Rourke.
Yeah, I think I'm going to ride with BC too in that game. That being said, I'm really, really looking forward to it. We've got some golf numbers. We got the FedEx Cup playoffs that begin on the weekend. And by the way, I'll do a quick golf report for our friends at Breezy Bend. By the way, if you do want to get on those Cool Bet lines and you haven't already bet at Cool Bet, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $200. If you haven't taken advantage of that right now with the NFL season just around the corner, might be a perfect time to utilize the WST promo code. But yes, our golf report for Breezy Bend. First of all, shout out to Brooke Henderson, who cashed our ticket last week on a top 10 finish at the latest major on the weekend. Got there just by a nose, but cashed a nice plus 235. And I want to give a shout out to Joey Panks and anybody else that rode with me in the lock shop on Joo-Hyung Kim, a.k.a. Tom Kim, who became the second youngest player since the Second World War to win on the PGA Tour, just barely 20 years old. He started off his tournament with a quad bogey and became the first player in PGA Tour history ever to start off with a quad on the first hole and win the event. And he ended up winning it, running away with the final day 61 to win. That makes it 4 weeks in a row for yours truly with the golf picks. Next episode tomorrow. Don't miss out. Wherever you get your podcast, put in Lock Shop or check mine and Dustin Nielsen's social media tomorrow. We'll likely be doing it in and around 11 a.m. or noon. You can get those picks in for the first round of the FedEx Cup playoffs. But yes, Cam Smith at the Open, 30-1. Finau at the 3M, 14-1. Finau back-to-back at the Rocket Mortgage, and then 33-1 on Tom Kim. It is a good time to be riding with the golf picks in the Lock Shop right now. And, of course, Breezy Bend, speaking of golf, looking forward to hosting the Canada Mid-Am and Senior Women's Championships later on this month. We'll be getting out there at some point. Really looking forward to that. But if you are thinking about a great home for you and your family on the golf course for next year at one of Winnipeg's top private courses, give Corey Johnson a call at Breezy Bend. Get on that waiting list. And you can also find out more on everything Breezy has to offer at breezybend.ca. I do want to talk a little bit more with Reem about the Blue Jays weekend. Of course, the Jays back in action tonight. As are the Goldeyes. But if you're thinking about getting out to, maybe spend a little bit of time in the bar watching the big game on the big screen, Boston Pizza is the place to do it. Make sure to check out that new summer menu, including the carnitas pizzas and tacos. Pizza flights are back. Great summer drinks as well. And hey, if you're staying at home, check out their game day deals and order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, we do have to get to our horse picks at the end, but a few other things. I was just texting with Weber, who, of course, joined you on Friday, Reem, from Minneapolis. Split for the Jays, 2-2 on the weekend. weekend, kind of a controversial way they won last night. The Minnesota manager completely losing their mind after the out call at home was overturned and Whit Merrifield officially scored the run, which ended up being the winner. But thousands of fans from Manitoba and Canada invading the Twin Cities. Just an amazing weekend for everyone that went in. And I'm sure there's some folks probably listening to this right now, driving back from the Twin Cities. Way to represent. And another big win for Valor FC yesterday. They had that tough loss last weekend, or I was still choked on Monday's show about the penalty call that wasn't. But 2 straight wins in regulation, 3 points in the table times 2. Big one yesterday, and Valor's still very much in the playoff race, trying to get into that 4th spot from 5th. So lots of other things going on the weekend as well. And as I mentioned, the Fish are back, starting a new series tonight at the ballpark with the 6:30 p.m. first pitch.
Yeah, we did also have some NHL signings today. As far as news we haven't even touched on. The Boston
Brown-Eyed Girl MJD has been all over us to talk about this all show. We saved some of the best for last. But yeah, Bergeron and Krejci back with the Boston Bruins. And kind of interesting way these deals have been put together, Reem.
Yeah, it's funny. The Boston Bruins had about just enough cap space. They had $1 million after both of those signings. Bergeron getting $2.5 million plus a $2.5 million in incentives. Krejci getting $1 million plus potential for $2 million in bonuses. I think I don't know. Well, Bergeron's value, according to some analytics, was over $10 million last year. One of the best two-way forwards maybe ever. He won the Selke last year. I think it's kind of gross seeing these guys take these discounts. It's not fair. Not fair to the other players. It's bringing down the salary structure for everyone. So you got to get paid what you're worth. And I don't understand why they're taking such steep discounts. They don't care. They really want to win, but I don't know. It seems fishy to me, Huss. I don't like it.
Well, I mean, it's not quite the straight up scam Kevin LeBlanc contract that triggered me so much a few years ago with the San Jose Sharks. But I will give them credit. This is a creative way of doing the deals, and I think it has a lot to do with the way the Boston Bruins are going to look in the first few months of the season. I mean, by all accounts, Marchand's out long-term, as well as Charlie McAvoy. And when you have players making that sort of money off the books for a long time, you know, it will allow them to accrue some cap space. Now, the thing about it is that, you know, on the day where you have to set your roster, you need to be cap compliant. For Bergeron to get the other $2.5 million when he plays 10 games, I think that essentially can eat up to what the money that they'll have to spend with those players on LTIR and then hope that they're back later on. But the return of Krejci, I think, is a real significant add. We thought that might happen after the World Championships when Pasternak was doing that Instagram video with Krejci. But they missed him last year. I mean, I think it's safe to say there was something lacking, down the middle of Boston, as good of a team and as close as they played Carolina in the playoffs. They missed that. And but the fact that he's coming in now in a season where many of us, myself included, think might be a down season for Boston because of a number of things around the team, but especially the availability of two of their star players. They certainly got the fans going in Beantown knowing that not only is Bergeron back, but Krejci's returning too.
Yeah, and Brad Marchand tweeted out his reaction, Huss. He just did the squirt water emoji. So I'm
sure those are just tears. Tears of joy.
Tears of joy, yeah. Tears of joy for bringing back Bergeron. And I never really got why there was so much doubt about Bergeron coming back. He's still playing at a really high level. Like maybe he wanted to get out early, like Calvin Johnson style, before you get hurt. I don't know. To me, it was like, yeah, keep going if you can do it. And he's still, again, one of the top guys in the league. So wasn't a surprise, but maybe surprise at the number. And it does help the Bruins be under the cap.
Like he's getting $5 million this year. I mean, obviously. I mean, he's going to play 10 games. He'll get that other 2.5, and they've structured in a bonus. But I'm sort of with you. Patrice Bergeron, I don't know any team that wouldn't jump at paying more than $5 million to have Bergeron playing in their lineup. But hey, he's been a Bruin for life. He will be a Bruin for life. Good on them for getting it done and keeping one of their most important players. All right. not only do we have fish tonight back at the ballpark, but we do have the return of live racing. Remo, I always love Mondays because we get to make our first picks of the week. They'll be doing it. We'll be doing it again tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday as well. 885-3330 if you want to make a reservation in the dining room for the amazing prime rib buffet. Where are you going with the picks for tonight?
All right, I got my picks in. One sec. Let me pull them up here. Sorry about that. Yeah, I got them already. I'm pumped. I don't know how you did on Thursday, but I think I did was over. I went over. I
won 9.25.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was over. We'll have to go. Me and you have to have a meeting and go through all of our.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna want to have that meeting, but I'm more than happy to do so.
I think I came on Thursday show. I was like, yeah, I was over, but you know what? I don't have my picks ready here. I know a couple of them I did. Let me bring it up here. And then I have another note. We know a couple notes we need to get to. Jersey notes we didn't touch on.
Yes, the jersey notes.
Jersey.
This could be fake news.
It's August. It's August. So we need to get in on some jersey. No. Okay, race 2.
Let's get the picks first.
Okay, race 2. Wits Coco. $5 to win. Is that the horse that was in that controversial finish?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm betting on it. So hopefully we
different rider. Ronald Ali is not on. Sheldon Chickeness, who was the rider in question, is out on Will Knows at number 3. So I imagine the folks. I imagine the Wit stable said, you know what? We're going in a different direction, Sheldon, after what happened a couple weeks ago.
Is this the first race Wits Coco has had since the incident?
I think you're right.
Yeah, well, I'm on Wits Coco. We saw what it can do when the jockey is leading it to try.
When he's dialed in, he's devastating.
So we'll see. Race 4. I've got 5 on I think it's guaranteed delivery. Yeah, guaranteed delivery. I got that one. And then this one, race 5, I am on Leah's on Tune. I believe we were on Leah's on Tune when we went there.
Yep.
Shares a name with my wife, so I have to put a 10 on Leah's on Tune. So there you go.
All right. Race number 3. I'll probably sprinkle on Wits Coco as well, but I got 2 locked and loaded in. Number 7, Distinct Approval in race number 3. We'll put on a win. And then in race number 4, we're going back to our old friend, We Need VLTs, Please. That was a big part of a triactor a couple games ago. Did not have a great race last time out. We'll see whether he can make something happen. And then over into race 6, Hoochie Coochie Sam, number 2, El Chairman, number 5, and I think we'll roll in with Plum Lucky for a triactor box as well. I'll probably put, if I have $3 or $4 left for race 7. Whoa, big 10 horses in race 7. Might be a great time to drop off to do another triactor for that one. We're going to take a bit of a longer shot. Let's go with number 10, Devil's Time. We'll get number 10, Devil's Time, in on that. Of course, if you haven't already been out to the Downs, make a point of getting out to the west side and enjoying it in person, especially this week with some beautiful weather. But if you can't make it, you can use the HPIBet.com site, which we're using to make our picks every race day over to Assiniboia Downs. And don't forget, you can watch the fellas do their thing, Stretch and Kirk, with all of their insight and the call on the Assiniboia Downs YouTube channel at asdowns.com. All right, Remo, before we go, let's get to this. Some Jets uniform. Well, this isn't technically news. This is very much speculation. As Remis said, in August, all topics are on the table, and the potential second retro reverse for the Jets has been rumored, but certainly nothing confirmed.
Oh, yeah. Well, I got to go to my Jersey source, Aesthetics, on Twitter, and they're actually on YouTube, and they put out a video today, Hustler, doing their reverse retro summer preview, and we can go through some of the other ones. But they have it at the chapters, so I skipped right to Jets, and what they're saying is, and I did tweet it out. They said the reverse retro follows the WHA era design, but using aviator blue instead of red. So it'd be like the blue Heritage Classic, and they put this out. They said that it could look like this. Something like this would be a concept. This is someone made a couple years ago. It's kind of like the Heritage jersey, but aviator blue color. I don't know if that's what it is, but this is what they have heard. It could be, with just the regular Heritage with the aviator blue instead of red. Interestingly enough, on the website for the person who worked for Adidas designing them, named Alex, I forget the name. Anyway, I forget her full name. Alex English, as it says in the top right. Alex English. She put like this. They had maybe some of their original designs that they didn't use. This was like from before this red jersey, and we had said we wanted to see this logo use the Jets 90s logo.
You said that. I didn't really.
I said that. I like this concept. I'm not sure I don't know if the last reverse retro, if you thought it was nice. I thought my first reaction was not that positive, but then it kind of grew on me. Same with the aviator one. But like they didn't seem to be that popular. They haven't sold a lot of them. I wonder if this style would be more of a winner. We'll have to wait and see what is unveiled for these reverse retro 2.0.
Well, if they did go with that one, I think it would be a boost just because it's different with a different logo, and there'll be some people that, for whatever reason, they kind of like. I don't think that's a nicer jersey, personally.
Yeah.
And to be honest, as much as I did like the aviators, and I really like the aviator blue, I think that if they went with that blue version of essentially the original reverse retro, I don't think it would be an improvement. I mean, I thought that the silver jersey was sharp. And man, if you saw the people that had the jerseys at the games wearing them, I mean, they were sweet. I just don't know whether we need another aviator jersey, especially when we had one that, looks very similar. It's almost like it really is the reversal, if you will, of that one. But as I said, I'll look forward to seeing what it is when it comes out. And listen, if they're coming out with this one and clearing out the gray ones or the silver ones, I'll be all over the clearance rack, if you will, picking up one of those, because I still think that those ones were great. They came out at a bad time though with COVID and all that. People really weren't at games very much, and I don't think people jumped on them as much. Bottom line is, no matter what happens with these jerseys, some people will pick them apart. Oh, where's the red? Where's the, there's always things like that. But I don't really think of the Jets as a red team at all. So a full red jersey and red socks, The red pants I'm into though on the jersey that I think everyone agrees is clearly the number one, and that is the Heritage jersey, if you will, that the Jets wore so many times last year. To me, those are top jerseys, right up there with the best jerseys in the league.
So they did have some leaks of reverse retro. You want to see what they have here, what we could see this season? The Sharks are going to have a Golden Seals.
That's cool.
Jersey with white skates, possibly.
The white skates? No way.
Possibly.
Okay, in on that.
Okay, and let's see. Oh, this Lightning sublimated jersey
Barf.
from 97.
Barf City. That is disgusting.
It's got like lightning bolts. I think this was like late 97 Storm jersey, they call it.
Oh, you couldn't pay me enough to put one of those on.
Okay. What about this one? The Fisherman jersey will come back.
I mean, it's
blue and orange only, no teal. We'll have to wait and see what it looks like. Bring back the fish sticks. Oh, we got these butts here.
All this free advertising for Captain Highliner every time we start talking about this jersey from the Islanders 90s version.
Okay, and something with the Spawn Oilers jersey, sponsored by McFarland.
I was with the Oilers when this one was out, and I have to admit, I liked it. I thought it was cool. I thought it was very different. I was into Todd McFarlane. I thought the oil drop in the middle was pretty neat.
I loved these.
That being said, they are so different from all the other Oiler jerseys. But if you would have told me that they were wearing those as opposed to those god-awful unis they were wearing last season, I would have thought that that was a win. I think the big win, though, is that they're going back to the more traditional blue home jerseys, and I think that's going to be worth a couple wins in the season right away. Whoa, what's this?
Oh, this is the Devils inspired by Kansas City Scouts as the next one. So we'll have to wait and see when these come out. This is our summer jersey dump. Oh, yeah, and this was the rumored Chicago one. Like a 37, 38 style. It says Chicago across the chest with striping. We'll have to wait and see.
The thing is, to see those, you'd actually have to watch a Chicago game this year, and I think that'll be painful for anybody involved. So we'll pass on that one.
And before we go, I think we need to address one thing. So Elliot Friedman broke the news yesterday about Mason Appleton signing with Winnipeg.
With win.
Yeah, I think the NHL needs to step in and has to tell him to stop doing this. It's completely disrespectful to Winnipeg. He writes Calgary as CAL. Everyone knows CGY. Everyone knows Winnipeg's WPG. The league can't have their top insider using incorrect abbreviations to troll the fans, because I know people get upset with it. I think it's just like calling it a different name. He
completely triggers so many people every time. And he does it on purpose.
I know he's doing it on purpose, but I think it's a bad look. He works for a team that's the rights holder of the NHL. He's got to stop. Someone has to stop him.
Have some respect for proper city and team abbreviations,
yes.
Mr. Friedman. It's about damn time.
I think so. So look, it's August. Need something to talk about. We don't have time to do it during the season. But now I don't want to see win anymore. It makes me want to vomit.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think he just sits back and laughs, looks at his inbox for all the people like you.
He for sure does.
Completely triggered by it, and has a good laugh for it. Well, we'll see whether the Jets give Mr. Friedman any more reason to put win or any other bogus abbreviation in a tweet at some point soon, because as we've talked about with Jeff Hamilton and on the show today, still has plenty of work to do to, hopefully improve this team heading into the season. But I guess only time will tell. One thing I do know is we'll have plenty of time to talk about it here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Dave Naylor's going to join us a little later on. We will talk quite a bit of Bombers this week heading into the game on Thursday, but we will also talk some NHL, and I'll look forward to, we didn't spend too much time on the Blue Jays, but Mike McIntyre was down there all weekend checking out the Blue Jays, so we'll talk a little bit about the series, what he saw in the Bluebirds, as well as more in the Jets offseason, and of course the Bombers getting ready for Thursday night, looking to go to 10-0 against the Montreal Alouettes. Thanks to John Hodge for joining us today. Thanks to Jeff Hamilton. And again, big thanks to Michael Remis for doing such a great job holding it down in my absence on Thursday and Friday. And again, to the great people at Aikens Lake, Pitt and Julie, Enzo, Paul and Liam, our guides. Thanks for an amazing few days out on the water. Cannot wait to do it again soon. Thanks to all the sponsors, and thanks to all of you for making us a part of your day. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, as well as the podcast wherever you get your content. And one thing I can guarantee for you, Michael Remis and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. with the latest in the Bombers' preparations for Montreal Thursday, NHL offseason, Jets news and notes, and much, much more right here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Have a great night.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.